Throughout history, free thinkers have outraged the religious with their wacky ideas about the virtues of free speech, reason, and of course, eating babies. Now, God is dying, and it's time to dispose of his remains. From the pits of hell, Satan sends two puppets of the imperialist West and the Zionist Jews against God, Islam, and tiny kittens to bring you their propaganda and conspire for a new world order. This is Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment with Ali Rizvi and Armin Navabi.
Islam is forbidden in Islam.
That's
good.
one.
All right.
I clicked on something.
There we go.
Yeah. All right, let's just get started. I think I'm seeing on my phone that everything is good.
Perfect. Testing is done.
Yep. No echo, nothing. Everything's good. Okay. So, welcome everybody to another episode of Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment. My name is Ali Rizvi. Alayhi salam. This is with me is Armin Navabi. We are co-hosts of this podcast called Secular Jihadists. Armin, hey, how's it going? You already,
Good.
Yeah. So this is good. You're willing to engage today, and so here we go. I've been looking forward to this for a couple of weeks now, considering everything that is going on. We're going to talk about whether the Qur'an is preserved. The Qur'an is considered in Islam to be the literal, letter-perfect word of the creator of the universe, the word of Allah, where nothing has been changed. The Qur'an itself says, and Allah promises in the Qur'an that he is going to protect it. He's going to protect every word of it from any kind of variation. Now, that's what a lot of people believe. But it is kind of an open secret in Islamic academia that this isn't exactly the case. Yes, the Quran is largely consistent, but there are differences in different versions of the Quran. And yes, there are different versions of the Quran. Some of these differences are minor. They're in punctuation or word choice. Others are more consequential. And sometimes they can even change the meanings of certain words and even certain verses. And it actually goes beyond that as well. So aside from these variants, there's also the question of the oldest available manuscripts of the Quran, right? Such as the Sana manuscript, which was discovered in the early 1970s and in Oman. In Yemen, not Oman. Let's get those two mixed up. So terrible. And they show significant differences between the older texts and the standard texts that we have today. So in any case, this is an issue that has blown up recently because of an incident involving one of the most renowned Islamic scholars in the Western world.
Before you go to that, we need to provide some context.
Yes, we will. I'm going to. I just want to introduce this, and we'll come back to it. So Yasser Qadhi had an episode, an interview with Muhammad Hijab, who's an Islamic preacher in the UK. Where he kind of let loose some of this. And we're going to get into that, as Armin said, later on. And now everybody has been talking about it. So Armin, you had something to say?
No, yeah, I just want to, before we go to the expert that we have here, Abdullah. So before we go into that, you are an expert. But I just want to mention that, first of all, how big of a deal this is, right? In the Islamic world, because there are a lot of the parts that were, as Ali mentioned, they're known secrets. So if we want to put all of the variations and the fact that the Quran was not preserved in two different categories, the way I would like to categorize it is the open secret ones, but then the parts that the Islamic scholars openly admitted always, right? But most Muslims did not know. Like, you know how Muslims always say, like, oh, you guys have no idea what you're talking about. Go talk to the scholars. Go look at what the scholars were saying. Well, if they actually did, if these average Muslims who they themselves don't go look at the scholars, if they actually did go and look at their own scholars, these were known in their own, like, Islamic schools of thought. Those are the ones that they also they admit is the lost parts of the Quran. Right, this was already in the Hadith. The parts that the Hadith and also all the scholars openly admitted that people forgot. People who remembered them were killed in wars. parts that were eaten by a goat.
Like the adultery, stoning to adultery, death and adultery verse, right? That was apparently.
Yeah, well, not just that. The part that was eaten by a goat was also the breastfeeding of adults. That was also eaten by a goat. So that's one thing they admit. Another thing that the scholars admit was the fact that the early Qurans did not have the vowelizations and the dots. What they do try to say is that that's not very significant, but I think we're gonna mention why that is actually very significant. Another thing that the scholars admit almost unanimously is the fact that Uthman burned a whole bunch of the Qurans with the different dialects to come up with one that has this one ahruf. But that doesn't make any fucking sense, because the fact that we just mentioned that at the time of Uthman there was no dots and there was no vowelization, makes it impossible for you to come up with a Quran that has only one ahruf, right? So but this is also something they admit, that without the dots and without the vowelization, there were going to be different ahrufs. So these are the things that they admit. The things that they did not admit, and this is, but even the things that they admit, to most Muslims, this is going to be mind blowing. Like, we're not even going to the parts that they didn't admit, because most Muslims that think like not even a single dot, not even this is the Quran is a copy, word by literal word of God, and just it's heresy to even suggest any of it has been changed. Is independent from space and time. There's a copy of it in heaven, and this is a copy of that, and it's like it's the uncreated word of God. Like, even the mere suggestion of that will be heresy to a lot of Muslim. And it was to me, like, I even as an ex-Muslim, learning about this was shocking. I was like, what the hell? How did we not know this, right? And these are not even, we haven't gotten into the parts that are earth-shattering. These are the stuff that has been with Islamic scholars for years. The parts that they do not admit is now what Ali also mentioned, is the early manuscripts. The early manuscripts show two things. One, the constant changes after the canonizations of the Quran, This, and this is normal with all other scripts, religious scripts, that we have the canonization, but people keep adding to it, removing it, changing it a little bit, changing, so, and we have evidence for that. But then even more significantly than that, with the Sana manuscript, which is the more, like, we have, I think, 6 early manuscripts, if I'm correct, right? But one of the early manuscripts, which is the Sana one, is the worst, is the most damaging to them of all, because it doesn't even just show the changing after the canonization, it shows the canonization process within itself, right? So that is like a huge revelation, and it's really hard to defend that. So
yeah,
is that a good way of like looking at this from a top-down approach, Abdullah?
Yeah, so I'll just add a few things to it. Is why is this such a big deal? Is because the Quran isn't just the inspired speech of God like the Bible. The Quran is the literal verbatim speech of God. And some hadith, it says that Gabriel literally goes to Allah, he hears Allah speak, and then he brings the message back down, right? And also that this message is preserved. A Quran that should correspond with the Quran we have now is apparently preserved in heaven, and it is also the eternal speech of Allah. So then goes to show that, okay, if there's variance, well, are all the variants in that draft? Well, there's a lot of drama we'll get into later. So one thing I'd also add is the preservation of the Quran has been pushed forth by prominent Muslim scholars in the past, and Muslim da'is, or Muslim people who invite people to Islam, constantly use the preservation of the Quran as a miracle. I have a 15-second clip from Muhammad Hijab for that as well, where he claims dot to dot, vowel to vowel preservation of the Quran as it came out of the mouth of the Prophet. And
this is what we grew up with. This is not just a miracle. This is the miracle.
This was told to everybody, myself, like Maududi has said that as well in his Tafhim al-Quran, and Maududi is a big scholar. And he said you can pick up any tafsir from anywhere in the world, Quran anywhere in the world, they'll be identical, which is obviously not the case. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you the different versions of the modern Quran. So there's variance in the text of the modern Quran that Muslims are completely oblivious of. Most Muslims think the Quran that we have is from 1924, which is one of the 10 readings that was canonized by Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt. And that became popular. But there's actually 10 readings of the Quran with the textual variants where words sometimes go missing, sometimes singulars become plurals, and sometimes words are added or omitted. And it does sometimes affect the meaning. So from then we go another step backwards. Then we go back to the manuscripts. In the manuscript, it's a whole mess where we'll see that before Uthman standardized the Quran, why did Uthman burn the Quran? That's the big story. What warranted such an extreme action to burn all the Qurans in the whole country? So we'll go into deep dive into the extent of the variance reported, which will shatter the preservation argument of the Quran. And then we will go to the Hadith, and at the end, we will try to show you what the Muslim defense is, that is the ahruf and their vagueness.
So for the timeline, you're working from a little bit all over the place, but just to you're working from the end and then coming from the beginning and then going, the Hadith is in the middle. So I just want to give some perspective for people, right? So you want to show so this is the Quran that all the Muslims apparently decided to agree on did not happen during Muhammad, did not happen during Abu Bakr, did not happen during Uthman, did not happen during Umayyad dynasty, did not happen during Abbasid dynasty. It happened in 1924. What? When I heard the number, when I was studying this, I was like, wait, what? This must be a mistype. And then I looked it up, 1924. Are you fucking serious? That recent? So this is. Again, this is something that Muslims would not even be able to comprehend, that this is the case. This is amazing, but you want to work from the end and then go backwards.
Yeah.
Okay,
can I? So I want to tell something to the audience here. So I know that a lot of right now what we have patrons listening live. They're watching this on video. If you're listening to this on iTunes, we're going to try our best to describe what Abdullah. I was going to call you Allah. What Allah is showing. What Abdullah is showing, but for this particular episode, we really, really recommend that you watch the video, because he's going to show video clips. He's going to show us the pictures of the verses and where the changes have happened. So it's actually going to be absolutely fascinating.
Link in the description.
There's a link to the presentation in the description as well. So he's doing this. If you want to watch it, you have to become a patron. The patron, it's actually really cheap. You can just set a maximum limit, and you can do it for as little as $1 if you want to check it out.
But we make the slides available in the description as well for people
they're for
who don't want to be.
So you can go on YouTube and you can access the slides and follow along if you want. So that's just a quick note there.
But we'll try to describe them as much as we can.
Yeah. So before we delve into it, just one thing is that Muslim scholarship has been aware of this and has been meticulously detailing and everything. And it's just that the average Muslim is, I don't know why, but purposefully fed this narrative of miraculous preservation, because otherwise the Quran loses its miraculous allure. There's nothing in there then if it's not preserved, because such a central theme, right?
Sorry, go ahead. No, finish what you're saying.
I was just going to start the presentation.
So, and I want to say that, I've already been seeing some comments here online where, people are saying, well, this is something, these are usually scholar type people who are in touch with this and study this. We're saying, well, this is something we've known for a very long time. So I have just two things to say that. This is something that scholarship has known for a very long time, but this is still very, very shocking. Even something like the ahruf and the qira'at, that's very shocking to the average Muslim. So this show is actually for that audience. Number one. Number two, Armin, just a second. Even if you are a scholar, we're not just going to focus on that. This is actually going to go much beyond it, as what Armin was talking about. We're not just going to talk about what the scholars are in consensus, have a consensus on, but we're going to go much more beyond it. So do check it out.
And actually, the drama alert at the end, I think, which we're going to talk about, is we remember how we said there's parts that the scholars admitted and most Muslims don't know, but there's also parts about the manuscripts that the scholars did not admit. The drama is about the part that some scholars are now Muslim Islamic scholars are now openly admitting these new findings, right? Okay.
All right.
Let's get started.
Yeah, can you start, Abdullah, with just for the introduction, what happened with Yasser Qadhi and Muhammad Hijab?
Oh yeah, so Yasser Qadhi was interviewed by Muhammad Hijab and put in the hot seat. So in 2016, this goes back a while. Yasser Qadhi was emailing this group of students and the students of knowledge, as he calls them, about his experience how the ahruf made him doubt and have him have a crisis of faith when he went to Yale, right? So one one brother who I'm not gonna name, Yasser Qadhi, was very mad at him, leaked those emails to Dava Man and Ustad Abdurrahman in the UK, and then they made hour-long videos of doing takfir and all sorts of deviant claims on Yasser Qadhi. This was like 2016.
Takfir means
to declare somebody. Not
a Muslim.
He's a deviant. He's some other sect. He's going to hell. Then what ended up happening was this interview happened a few weeks ago. So Muhammad Hijab questions him again on this matter 4 years later. And Yasser Qadhi is like, I'll be straight up with you. The Muslim standard narrative has big holes in it. And it's a known academic secret that the Qur'an isn't preserved the way Muslims think it to be. So then Hijab made a very blunt question and said, if I give you a blank mushaf, will you be able to write the Quran in it? And he said it's not an easy answer. And this blew up. Ended up that Muhammad Hijab had to delete the last 30 minutes of the interview where this whole controversy is discussed. And then Yasser Qadhi left the interview up without editing it, but then turned the comments off a few days later. Then Hijab in the end says, if Yasser Qadhi holds a non-normative view, we're going to refute him. So there's infighting going on. And on top of that, Western academics jumped in, and they are also now challenging and bringing forth. Yeah.
So for people who don't know who any of these people are, we're talking about the drama between Islamic scholars and Islamic street activists, right? So the Islamic street activists are people who are in the front lines and going and doing the apologetics and spreading Islam and defending Islam against people who attack Islam. But they keep on having to rely on the work of their scholars to be able to do their activism. So there's a drama between like this whole new revelations on the fact that the scholarly work that shows the Quran hasn't been preserved is causing a whole bunch of drama between all the people involved. That's basically the gist of it. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
So let's get into it, because this is about 70 slides, and we will get through them. So what we'll start with is seeing some variants in the modern Qur'ans we see today.
Just to be clear with the terminology, correct me if I'm wrong, but like I know the ahrufs and qira'ats are used interchangeably by a lot of people, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah, so the thing is, there's about 41 different opinions on this, and we will come to this at the end.
Okay.
And then you will realize how nonsensical and how ridiculous the ahruf claim is. So we'll wait till that at the end.
Okay. All right,
let's get started with the variant. So the first variant we have here in Surah Hadid is Surah 57, verse 24. In the Hafs, the normal standard popular reading of the Quran, it says, الَّذِينَ يَبْخُلُونَ وَيَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبُخْلِ وَمَنْ يَتَوَلَّ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الْغَنِيُّ الْحَمِيدُ. So there's the word huwa, which means he. It's present in the Hafs Quran, but in the Warsh Quran, it is يَتَوَلَّ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَنِيُّ الْحَمِيدُ. So the word, a three-letter word, huwa, ha, waw, and I think the alif as well. But sorry, ha and waw is missing, so it's not there. It doesn't affect the meaning per se, but then you ask, what's the point of having a variant like this that brings absolutely no additional meaning or value to the verse? And you will see this theme throughout. So why is this to be important to be remembered? The reason being is, how do we distinguish if this variant is a mistake, a misheard in human memory, or is it actually the revealed variant from Allah? Because the Quran doesn't give us a framework. It doesn't even tell us that it has variants at all. We have to go to hadith written hundreds of years later to make this post hoc rationalization. So just remember, yeah.
So this is a
you gotta
variation.
raise your hand, Armin.
Sorry.
We have to
I can't see you guys, by the way, so I'm just looking at the screen.
Okay, so how do I tell you that I want to ask a question?
I'll moderate.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So here, this is, just to be clear, this is a variation between the different modern Qurans. We're not even talking about the manuscripts right now.
Oh boy, when we get to the manuscripts, it will be crazy. So let's
right, the early, so the early manuscript, and the shocking thing about this is, like, a lot of people think, like, oh, you have to go dig around the early manuscripts to be able to find variations in the Quran. No, these are Qurans that are openly circulating out there.
Here,
like,
you can
could
go on
buy
this website.
these. What?
There's a website called QuranFlash.com, and you can find all of these different Qurans in PDF versions to read. That's where I got it from.
But and if you think all these Quran websites are Zionist funded or something like that, you could actually go and take a trip to, like, Africa and other places, and you can buy these Qurans and you could compare them yourselves. But the Hafs one, the reason why you keep comparing everything to the Hafs one is because that's the most popular. 95% of today's common Quran, the one that was agreed on in 1924, is that
okay.
Right.
So let's
go on.
Let's go on.
Yeah. All right. So in the Surah Imran, chapter 3, verse 133, in Hafs origin, we see that the verse starts with the letter Waw, which says wasari'u. But in the Warsh version, the letter Waw is not there; it's missing. It's just sari'u. It doesn't change the meaning per se, but the point is, again, what's the wisdom behind putting a variant like this in there that brings absolutely nothing of value to the verse, and if anything, makes it look like a human lapse or a human mistake in memory? Let's move on to the next one. So we have Surah Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 184. This one is important because this one has an implication and meaning. The Hafs one says that fidyatun ta'amu miskin, which means that this is talking about if you can't fast, you have to feed a certain amount of poor people. So here it says you have to feed one poor person in Hafs, okay? But what's staggering is in Warsh, it says ta'ami masakin. It goes into plural. So it says you have to feed, so it could lead to the confusion to feed more than one person. Now, what's also interesting is the spelling is the same, and what they did is they just changed the harakat, like the vowel signs, to make it, which is also wrong. They can't do that. Let's go further to Surah Kahf. This is Surah 18, verse 36. Now, one thing you will also realize that the verse numberings are almost always different between these Qurans. They normally never align. They're off by 2-3 verses or something. Now, why is this also important? Because this has great ramifications for claims about linguistic miracles, which depend on precision verse letter numberings, or the miracle of the 19. And some of these miracle claims only work with just one version out of the 10 readings, so that's one thing to remember. So in Surah 18, verse 36, the Hafs version says khayram minha munqalaba, whereas the Warsh says minhuma munqalaba. So there's an extra word, and it's not changing in meaning. It says minha from it in a singular, and minhuma is in a dual sense. And it's talking about, it still makes sense because you had 2 gardens. But the verse division is also different in this one. As you can see on the right side, the verse is not ending after abada, but it keeps going, whereas on Hafs it ends after abada. Now again, another a variant here in Surah Baqarah, verse 132. In the Hafs it says wawassa, and Warsh says wa'awsa. They mean the same thing, but again, like I said, it's more likely these were part of human memory flaws, and rather than Gabriel actually revealing them in this way. This one's an interesting one, where this reads quite differently. وَجَعَلُوا الْمَلَائِكَةَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ إِنَاثًا. In the Hafs version, where the words are Ibadur Rahman, meaning the slaves of the most merciful, and it's talking about angels. But in the Warsh version, it says الَّذِينَ هُمْ عِنْدَ الرَّحْمَنِ. So Ibadur Rahman and Inda Rahman, although the skeleton is the same, they are different meanings. So Inda Rahman means next to or with or along with Allah, whereas Ibadur Rahman means the slaves of the Most Merciful. So that's a slight change in meaning here. So another one here, this is not a big change in meaning in whatsoever, but again, Anjaytana is in Surah Al-An'am 663 in the Warsh version, whereas in the Hafs version, the most common version is Anjana. Now, Armin earlier brought up the point constantly about diacritical marks not existing. If you notice, most of these variants, post-Osmanic, have very similar skeleton structures of the word, but most of the changes happen where the marking, the vowel diacritical marking changed and how you pronounce the word. And because the way the Arabic language is very precise, even instead of the sound of if you make e, it can change the meaning or the tense or the gender of the word.
Right.
So what we will do is we'll keep going. Again, in Surah Tawbah, Surah 9, verse 107, we have in the Hafs another letter, the waw, walladhi, walladhina, and in the Warsh, the waw doesn't exist, it's omitted, and it's alladhina. Again, not a change in meaning. So now we are on Surah 26, verse 217, in Surah Shu'ara. Here it says, وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى الْعَزِيزِ الرَّحِيمِ. Put your trust in Allah. But in the other one it says فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Thus put. So it's the same meaning, but it's just why I changed the fa with the va. What also is important, if you were to look at the manuscripts, it's very easy to confuse the va with the fa, right? So now one can ask, wait, was it actually revealed both ways, or one was revealed by Allah and one was a scribal error, but both they made it into the recital?
Right.
So there's a lot of ambiguity and questions that'll keep popping up like this.
Can I
Armin.
say something specifically about this one? This one especially shows how this is a result of human error rather than any divine plan to have two different separate meanings of the Quran, because the va and fa, is that the fa, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Right? They are very similar looking, right? So you can see how some people could have mistook them from each other, and whether it was connected to the te after or not, right?
Exactly.
So the fact that they look like each other and you have two versions of them is highly suggestive that this is a human product of human error. And this is very significant because this is not just the vowelizations and the dots that are missing. This is part of the core skeletal part of the verse that is different. Like, this is extraordinary. But go on, yes.
So yeah, just to kind of explain it to when you say fatawakkal, then the F is connected to the T. When you say watawakkal, the wa is not connected to the T. So there's a difference in skeletal structure here too.
Exactly.
Completely two different things depending on if it's a or a F or a V.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next one. So here we have Surah Ghafir, chapter number 40, verse 26. So in the Hafs version it says, أو أن يظهر, whereas in the Warsh it says, وأن يظهر. So there's one alif that was missed here, and it changed the word. So if you notice on the left side, it's because of the single alif, it was أو أن يظهر. But in the Warsh, the alif isn't there, so it's wa an yuzhir. And like I said, like Armin and you just reminded, that these are more suggestive of a scribe forgetting to put the alif in and stuff like this. These are oversights that trickle through the cracks rather than these being actual variants that were revealed. And they don't really bring anything of value to the verse, right? So it's pointless to have them. Again, here we have a similar one that we just talked about with the fa. So in Surah Shura, it's Surah 42, verse 30, it says, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ. Whereas in the Warsh, it says, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ. So the letter fa is missing from the Warsh. So again, this is a skeletal thing where the letter was omitted. In this one, again, we see Surah Zukhruf, Surah 43, verse 71. In the Hafs, it says, Ma tashtahihil, whereas Shuba, the other Riwayah, it says ma tashtahil. So there's two, I think, letters that are additional in the hafs, and like again, it's a skeletal change. It doesn't really affect the meaning that much. This one is again in Surah 91, Surah Shams, verse 15. Hafs says vala, and Warsh says fala. And like Armin and we talked about earlier, again, the va and the fa can connect, and they're very easy to confuse. So this again could be a scribe mistaking it. Now here's where things get very important.
Abdullah,
yeah.
Sorry, one question for fala and the wala. Is there a meaning difference there?
It's not. It's a negation of, but I don't think there's. Yeah, in this context, it doesn't affect the meaning. It's just thus. The word is we fala and thus, and wala means and.
Yeah.
So the thus and the and, or the hence and the and. That's kind of the thing.
So just to point out to people, like, well, if it doesn't change the meaning, or why does it matter? So first of all, we saw in some places it did change the meaning significantly, right?
Yeah.
We have examples
we'll
of
see
places,
that more.
There's a lot more. There's a lot more of that. But the fact that some places it doesn't change the meaning shows that this type of error happens whether it changed the meaning or not. So this is an error that you can see constantly happening between the fa and ve, and sometimes it change the meaning significantly.
And a lot of the times that also you'll see is sometimes the variant in one of the readings is grammatically more correct than one of the other ones, but they're both authentic. So there's these kind of issues too, but we won't go into that much detail.
Okay.
Now, what we're getting to here is when there's historical contradictions start popping up. And this is very important to understand. So in Surah Jinn, chapter 72, verse 20, Hafs says the word qul, which means Allah is commanding Muhammad to say something.
Oh, wow.
Whereas Warsh, it says qala, where Allah is quoting Muhammad, saying the dua.
Yeah.
So now you ask, okay, you can't have both of them happen at the same time. It's a historical contradiction. So did Allah command Muhammad first, or did Muhammad make the dua on his own initiative and Allah quoted him in the Qur'an?
So
these are major. Sorry.
Say, right? Qul means say this, and qala means and he said.
Yeah.
Right. Oh.
And for people who are not familiar with Islamic theology, I mean, I think Jews would be very familiar, like rabbis would be very familiar with this. These differences that might not seem like a big deal to non-Muslims or atheists, these are significant the theological implications from these differences are significant on both philosophical ways of how people look at Muhammad and God and revelation, and also in practices. It's night and day. Like, you have every single one of these verses, they have been analyzed and people have came up with conclusions based of that for hundreds of years. So these differences are huge, very significant.
Yeah. And we will see this qul and this qala problem occur again and again. Now, one of the most interesting defenses of this from a Muslim I heard was, so the Quran was being revealed in many different ways at the same time. So therefore, when Allah commanded Muhammad, he was reciting the Quran, so he was also saying the dua. So Allah was quoting him at the same time. So it's like this weird quantum superposition.
Yeah. This is important in the devil's advocate section. Is that I have the Schrodinger's Quran in that part. So
Schrodinger's Quran.
Yeah,
oh my God.
That's gonna come later.
That's the title of this episode: Schrodinger's Quran.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
Okay, so in this one we have Surah Mu'minun, Surah 23, verse 89. Now, here's another thing that happens is when Allah quotes historical speech, you cannot have a person or a group say two different things or two different words, because people don't speak like that. People aren't speaking in variants, right? So there is this thing too. Now, also you can say that not Allah doesn't quote verbatim speech all the time, but sometimes he does, especially when he's quoting the kuffar of Mecca, right? So here we see in the Hafs version, he says, they said, sayaqulun lillah. It belongs to Allah. But in the Duri version, it says, سَيَقُولُونَ Allah. They were asked and they said Allah. So belongs to, it's a possession difference, right? And that's, as again you can see, because of this missing alif in the Hafs. There's an extra alif in the Duri. So سَيَقُولُونَ Allah and سَيَقُولُونَ لِلَّهِ. That's a slight difference in meaning. It doesn't really affect nature, but again, like if Allah is quoting precise speech of these people, then Allah needs to make sure He doesn't give differences, because He's also, remember, He's omniscient, so there is no room for error.
Allah.
So this is Surah Ahqaf, Surah 40.
Did Ali just say astaghfirullah?
I said, damn it, Allah. Like, what? What are you doing?
So Surah 46, verse 15. This is like not even a big variant on its own, but again, it's just like the missing alif. The meaning is unchanged. This is one of the nice verses of the Quran too, where it tells people to be nice to your parents. So in the Hafs version, it says, وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ إِحْسَانًا. Whereas in the Warsh version, it says, بِوَالِدَيْهِ حُسْنًا. So ihsana and husna, they're synonyms. But just because of the missing alif, it could make the person read it in a different way. Now, one thing before we move forward is in classical scholarship, you can see that scholars would say that even synonyms, if you use a synonym, you're lying upon Allah, and it is considered takfir according to some people.
Oh yeah, we were told in school if you change the dots in the Quran, the punishment for that is like eternal hellfire. Like it's one of the most unimaginable sins for you to even change the dot. But now we're learning the dot wasn't even part of the Quran. So
exactly.
Well, I mean, this is the flip around, right? It's the flip around where they tell you don't even change a dot, even if you use a word that means the exact same thing, even if you use a synonym. This is horrible. You shouldn't do it. And then later on, you say, "Hey, there's two versions with two synonyms." You're like, so they're synonyms. So who cares?
There's no problem. Like, what the hell? Like, everything changed all of a sudden. You're like, they're pretending like they were not like for all our lives not obsessing over how nothing has changed. Now that we discover, everything has changed. You're like, oh, there's nothing to see here. Everything is okay. Like, what the hell? Like, what happened? What happened?
When I first read about this and I first found out about this, and I asked people around me, they just seemed like they're like, well, this shows how these differences are so minor. I'm like, you're not even supposed to. It's the literal, But anyway, let's go on.
Okay. So the next one is Surah Yasin, Surah 36, verse 35. So in the Hafs version, it reads, لِيَأْكُلُوا مِنْ ثَمَرِهِ وَمَا أَمِلَتْهُ. So in the Shuba version, it says, وَمَا أَمِلَتْ. So it's just talking about what their hands sent forth. And the letter hu is added in Hafs. And in Shuba, the letter hu doesn't exist. It doesn't affect the meaning in any significant way, but it's just like another omission of a letter for no real reason. Now, here's another one, and this is where singulars become plural and vice versa. In Surah Ra'd, in Surah 13, verse 42, Hafs reads, وَسَيُعَلِّمُ الْكُفَّارِ, plural, as in disbelievers. In the Warsh version, it says, وَسَيَعْلَمُ الْكَافِرِ. So وَسَيَعْلَمُ الْكُفَّارِ فَسَيَعْلَمُ الْكَافِرِ. So it's a singular versus plural. Disbelievers versus disbeliever. Again, like it doesn't significantly alter the meaning here. Now, again, another instance of plural and singular here is in Surah Tahrim 66 is the chapter number and 12 is the verse number, where it says, بِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّهَا وَكُتُبِهِ in the Hafs, and in Warsh it says بِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّهَا وَكِتَابِهِ. So again, kutub is plural and kitab is singular for book. So books and book. His book and his books. So it doesn't really change the meaning per se, but again, like you can see, this one actually is just a play with the diacritical marks, right?
Okay, can I say something? Just to show how like Abdullah is the way Abdullah is talking about this. I want to see how, if you're a Muslim and you're listening to this, this is an ex-Muslim atheist who's speaking about Islam, but he's telling you the parts that he doesn't think is that big of a change in meaning. Like, you can see that he's not having an agenda here. He's being honest about what he's saying. I would say, though, that the fact that the meaning has changed at all is already like a big, like, I know there's other examples, there are many examples where the meaning changes a lot, but even when it comes to singular and plural, you have a difference in meaning. Like, the entire message could not be, maybe is the same, but that is very, to me, I mean, I know to the average people that doesn't seem very significant because it's conveying the same message, but based on what I've grown up with and what we were meant to believe, the fact that the meaning change, is different, is very significant. So I just want people to understand how this looks from different perspective, how significant and insignificant this could be based on different verses.
That's a good point. And I just want to say, I mean, we're not even we're through this all. Abdullah's pointed out all of these things. You got to remember, the Quran is not such a big book. I mean, the Bible is a nightmare, right? In the sense that it's very, very long and it's very tedious to get through. The Quran is actually much more readable. It's much shorter, and already for something that is considered the literal word of God, we've already got so many differences here already. Right now, this wouldn't make a difference if we were talking about different versions of Alice in Wonderland, which, by the way, all the different versions of Alice in Wonderland are actually way more identical. But
what's actually interesting is that the Christian belief about the Bible went through this phase too, where it was first the verbatim word of God, then it became the inspired word of God written by
Torah,
man.
Old Testament, yeah.
And now it's like, it's not perfectly preserved. There are variants, but the meaning isn't affected. This is exactly what the Christians say.
Metaphorical, yeah.
Although I would say that post-Osmanic, comparatively to the Bible, the Quran is much better preserved. But again, that doesn't mean it's miraculously preserved. It just lends to good human preservation, but still it has its flaws.
That's the difference. Human preservation and miraculous preservation are two very, very different things. If your claim is miraculous preservation, you have a much, much higher threshold of that has to survive scrutiny, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Or complete or 100% complete preservation. That's the standard that no Muslim claim that they have met, but they have not. And the fact that they thought that they have met that, basically what you guys are saying is admitting if no human preservation could ever be complete, and that was Muslims' way of proving that this is a miracle of Allah, because no human would be able to preserve a text so perfectly. So the fact that the Quran that was preserved so perfectly, they say that must be a miracle. Well, sorry.
Well, it's like the idea that even if you found a single little turd in an Olympic-sized pool, would you jump in?
I would.
Armin, you eat scorpions. Okay, let's go on.
It's an Olympic-sized pool.
Okay, so we're getting distracted here.
We have Surah Ahruf, Surah 7, verse 141. So in Hafs it reads yuqatilun, and Warsh it reads yaqtulun. The meaning isn't affected in any big way, but it's about fighting and killing. Let's move on.
What? That's a big difference. Fighting and killing?
Well, because if they're fighting, then they're gonna eventually get killed.
Oh,
so that's their way of explaining it.
Wait, can you say what? Isn't one of them? Yeah, go on.
Yuqatilun and yaqtulun. So yuqatilun is in Hafs, and yaqtulun is in Warsh. Now,
wasn't there a verse that was the difference between like you being killed or you killing other people? Okay, but
we'll get to that, I think.
Oh, okay. I thought this was that one. Okay, good.
So this is Surah Anbiya 21, chapter verse 104. Again, the same thing, kutub and kitab. So Hafs says kutub, plural, and Warsh says kitab. But here, if you were to open the thing, it might slightly alter the meaning because it's singular and plural.
Right. I want to get to the word significant.
He's gonna, right? From what I can see, he's gonna wrap the heavens up in his like a scroll or something. And
can we just go over the significant, the ones that have difference in significant meaning?
Oh yeah. So here, this one is just we're almost done with these, and we're gonna get to the juicy part in a bit.
Okay.
When we get to the manuscript. So in Hafs it says salawatak, and Warsh it says salawatik. It doesn't change the meaning, but some people have suggested that one of them is grammatically correct and the other isn't. Again, you can read the tafsir, they have 1,000 excuses to make sense of it. Now, here's something interesting. In Surah Baqarah, chapter 2, 165, is Hafs says yara and Warsh says tara. So they will see versus you will see. So here there is a meaning problem. So if you were to open a translation, so I can, let's see, 165. Quran to 160. By the way, can you see my screen or just?
Yes.
No, I'm still seeing.
Oh no, we're seeing the we're seeing the PowerPoint right now.
Okay,
so
I'll share.
Let's move it to the So, Surah 2, 165.
Yeah. So let me just quickly share that.
I can read it out.
Oh.
All right, there you go. So, okay, it says. And yet among the people, those who take other than Allah as equals, they love Him as they should Allah. But those who believe are stronger for their love for Allah. And here's the important. And if only they who have wronged would consider that when they see the punishment, okay, they would see the punishment. In the other one, it's tara, which means you will see the punishment. And if they only have wronged, would consider that when you see the punishment. So it's kind of again, like you can see, there's a little conflict in meaning here.
Well, it could be significant conflict because a lot of times in the Quran, when it says you, it's referring to Muhammad, right? Speaking to the Prophet.
Exactly. So, but here they can argue when you, so you as in a collective group, Allah is addressing them all, or you will see the punishment like they will too. Right, so they could argue in that sense too. But I just wanted to point that out that tara and yara actually have a little significant difference there. Alrighty, let's screen share again. Oh my god, the screen share thing is back and forth.
Yeah.
All right. We did that.
And while you're doing this, I just want to remind people that the different variations of modern Qurans that we're looking at, there's more than 30 Qurans right now that are circulating, and you could get. Is it 31 or 37?
It's a very, I've seen all sorts of claims, but I on my own have 14 mushafs from different 14 riwayas.
Okay, so you own 14 different Qurans that are different from each other.
I don't own. I have them in PDF.
Oh, you have them in PDF.
Yeah,
okay.
That's owning. If you own them.
I got them from a free Muslim website. It's called islamcity.org.
No, because then Muslims are going to be like, oh, these are Zionists funded website. I want them to go out and actually physically hold these Qurans in their hands and compare them with each other.
Let's forget about what everybody's going to think and what they're going to
let's keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going.
We have Surah Araf, verse 57. In Hafs it says Bushra, whereas in Warsh it says Nushra. Again, it's a similar meaning. And again, this is a variant where just where the dot is put is what changes it. Like
I knew both of
one
them.
Dot, the noon and the ba.
Bushra and Nushra, they were both they're sisters.
Yeah, Bushra and Nushra. There you go. Again, here this one. Again, if you could show the thing Yarawnahum and Tarawnahum, like we're saying, they will see, you will see. In Hafs it says Yarawnahum, and Warsh it says Tarawnahum. So again, it's not the end of the world, but it's definitely different, and it does slightly affect the meaning. Again, so Surah Fat, Surah 48, verse 17, Hafs says Yudkhilhu, versus Warsh says Nudkhilhu. Again, you can see that this, because the dots weren't put in the manuscripts, just the dot for the ya and the noon is what's making this word change. And again, it doesn't change, it's just a pronoun changes, we versus I enter you in Jannah versus we enter you in Jannah, and Allah is talking from His perspective. Here's is an interesting one. Now this is again, and you will understand because both of these words are in Urdu as well. So kabira is great. So in this verse, Allah is saying, "Rabbana atihim di'fayn min al-azab wal'anhum la'nan kabira," meaning that, oh Allah, increase and double for them the torture and send upon them a big or a great lanat or a great curse.
Curse.
Yeah. Whereas in Warsh it says وَلَعَنْهُمْ لَعْنًا كَثِيرًا. So here the word is
A
kathira,
lot.
a lot,
Yeah.
or in abundance, versus kabira, which means great. So again,
Yeah.
like these can be scored together, but when read separately, they are different meanings of the word. Where kabira is
Yeah. So
okay.
are
You
there
can say like
one giant
yeah,
curse or a lot of small curses?
yeah,
It's like if you have like a really big penis versus lots of penises.
Lots
Right?
of small penis.
Yeah, there's lots of.
Okay.
It may not be small; they could be big. There's no specification of the size, but the point
Okay.
is that you just have a lot of penises.
Wait, go back to that one.
Yeah,
Go. Yeah. The whole that kabira. Okay, so that kabir for people who we're supposed to mean big or great. That's where the word akbar in Allahu Akbar this shares the same root, kabara.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right. And Ibn Kathira. All right. So we're at Surah 15, Surah Hijr, verse 8. Now, this one is very ironic. And you know why? Because the next verse is the verse that in which Allah promises to preserve the Quran.
Ooh, wait, are you serious? So
I'm not
you're
joking.
so
It says,
the verse that we all started all this, the verse that promised that God promised that Quran is going to be preserved. You're saying that verse specifically hasn't been preserved?
the verse before that has a variant reading in it.
This is beautiful. This is amazing. This is so ironic. This is poetic in so many different levels. Okay.
Armin, cold shower, Armin. Cold shower. Let's go.
So
Let's move on.
in the Hafs version, it says, "Ma nunazzil malaika," that we do not send down angels. And in Warsh it says, "Ma tanazzal." It's not a huge change. Some sites, whether I read the translation, was "you do not send down." One flows better, the other doesn't. But the irony is the next verse is the verse where Allah says, "And we have indeed sent down the reminder, and we will indeed be its guardian."
Be its guardian, and this is the source of the whole claim that that this whole miraculous preservation of the Quran, which is the main miracle. The Quran is the main miracle in Islam above all other miracles, more than Jesus raising people from the dead, more than Moses bringing fire from the sky. This is that verse, and you're saying
Surah 15, verse 8, right? I don't know if we said the.
Yeah, Surah 15, verse 8.
Oh, thanks, Ali.
Okay. So now we are at Surah Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 85. So in the Hafs version, at the end of the verse, it says, وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. Whereas the Warsh says, وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا يَعْمَلُونَ. So again, it's the thing where you work or your deeds or their deeds. Allah is not unknowing or is not ghafil about what you do, and the other one says what they do. Again, it doesn't affect the meaning in a great way because Allah is aware of both your deeds and their deeds. But if it was put in a certain specific context, he's addressing a certain claim and it's a conversation, then it could change the meaning. So this one is interesting, and this is where I said that why is Allah, is he coding speech, and why is he purposefully trying to confuse people? So this is Surah Qasas, Surah 28, verse 48, and it's talking about the magicians that Moses was competing against, right, with the Pharaoh. So here it says, they said, Sihran, Tazahar. So there's two works of magic, where one verse says, and the other says, Sahiran, which means there's two magicians or two works or magic. So what the contention here is Allah is quoting somebody. They said either they said two works of magic or either they said two magicians. So there's two magic tricks versus two magicians. So this could be a contradiction. Like I said, if Allah is quoting them here, like it seems, that means that this is a historical contradiction because they didn't speak both of those things. And it also, the variant has no, it's just for confusion because now we are questioning, okay, wait a minute. Were there two magicians or were there one magician doing two magic tricks, right? And
Wait, that small little vertical line is what makes it Saharan instead of Sehran.
Yeah.
But what if there were what if I say there were two magicians, two wizards? It's mostly a wizard, not a because two wizards, and each one of them did one magic, so that would be both of them would be true at the same time if each one of them did one magic.
Yeah, so like I said, these come with the presupposition that you assert that the ahruf are actually there, and the Quran was actually revealed with these variants like this.
Yes, on purpose.
Supplement each other.
Which
right?
is a new claim.
Yeah, which is a new claim.
Right.
But the problem is that you can't distinguish if this is a variant that was revealed or if this is an actual mistake a scribe made while copying.
Right.
Or somebody misheard, because there's no objective thing the Quran tells us to use this to decipher. Okay, this is a revealed variant, and this is like a mistake or a scribal error, right? So
to be clear, what you're saying is that the new claim is actually, this is actually a bigger miracle, because look, the different God is so wise that the different recitations will actually, they're both correct, and they both are trying to tell you different things, and God is so miraculous that it's like that these different recitations all are serving their own purpose independently, which makes Quran even a bigger miracle. The response to that is like, so do you guys just figure this out only after only after like the secular world is embarrassing you that the Quran is not preserved? Now you only figure this out now?
They knew about this, they knew about these variants and stuff, but it's just that the scholars didn't tell these things to the average lay Muslim at all. That's the problem.
So that's what I'm saying. Now that you're being like, this is a new claim in response to this, the scholars making this public and people, Islam being embarrassed for the fact, and they're coming up with new claims that didn't exist for 1400 years. But another thing is that if this is a miracle of itself, why do we see these variations exactly how we would expect human errors to happen?
Exactly.
Like, you don't see variations like this being a miracle for Quran on purpose having two different variations, where actually you could see that like the changes in a way that could not be a human error. Like, we don't see examples of that.
There's no purpose to them.
They're useless. They're
accidental, nonsensical.
And they don't bring value to the verse. But one thing important to remember is with these variants, they've been known by scholars for a huge amount of time. And the thing is, like, they've had 14 centuries to come up with excuses or to try to figure something out, right? So like they will, like Armin pointed out, they will say that they're reading compliments, saying there's two magicians and they did two tricks, right? But even though if you nitpick on that, okay, well, it doesn't specify if both the magicians did the tricks. It could be one of the magicians doing the tricks.
One of them didn't do anything.
It could be
one of them just so many
variables, right?
Clapping for another one.
And like I said, they can't tell you if this is a mistake. There's no distinction, right? And that's the problem. Now, here again, we are at Surah Baqarah, verse 259, it's chapter 2. And this is a very tiny variant. We'll just skim over this. كَيْفَ نُنْشِزُهَا ثُمَّ نَكْثُهَا لَحْمًا. And in this one, it says نُنْشِرُهَا. And like I said, it's not changing anything. Here, another one in Surah Baqarah, verse 58. نَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ يُغْفِرْ لَكُمْ. It's I'll forgive you, we will forgive you. Another qala and kul happens here. Now this one's important because in Surah Anbiya, verse 21:4, it says Allah quotes in the Hafs Quran that Muhammad said, "Rabbi ya'lam al-qawlu fi as-sama'i wal-ard wa huwa as-sami'u al-alim." But in Warsh it says qul, so he's commanding Muhammad, "Rabbi ya'lam al-qawlu fi as-sama'i wal-ard wa huwa as-sami'u al-alim." Right? So again, like, are these the words? Did these words come from Allah first, or did they come from Muhammad first and Allah quoted them? And this is a very serious theological and historical point to be made.
Wait, how so? Wait, say it again.
So Qala means said. So in the Hafs version, Allah is quoting Muhammad saying this dua, "Oh my Lord, you know every word and spoken which is in the heavens and the earth. You are all knowing," right? But in Warsh Quran, it says Qul. So Allah is commanding Muhammad to say the dua, "Oh my Lord, you know everything that's." And it makes sense from the Hafs version that Muhammad is making this dua because it says Rabbi, oh my Lord. Right. It wouldn't make as much sense from the Warsh. That's what I'm saying. Like some of these variants, you can see that some of them flow better and make more sense than the others at times, and not necessarily supplement.
This is the kind of thing where Armin, especially like since he's praising God, it's like me saying, well, Armin said, hey, Ali is the most amazing guy and he's like really good looking, versus, you know, me saying, Armin, say, I'm commanding you to say that I'm an amazing guy and really good looking. Like that's a big difference.
The reason why they're significant, because if God says to Muhammad to go say this, is actually it's a message of go tell it to other people. Like one of them is a prayer. The other one is like a missionary work, like a letter
versus testimonial.
Yeah. And here's one thing we should have said from the beginning, which we forgot, because a lot of people who are looking at the slides, every time you start, they're looking at the right side and then they're looking at the left side. Because this is Arabic, like. I forgot,
I read from the right, but the slides,
because I think the three of us have been starting looking at the left version and then looking at the right, because Arabic, so just want to be clear about that.
So to help out, on the left side, I've kept the normal, modern, more popular Quran, and on the right side is mostly the variants.
Yeah, but you're rating in Arabic, so you should have had it the other way around.
No, it's in English too. The words and specific things. It's fine. It's clear. It's gone.
All right. So in Surah Ma'idah, chapter 5, verse 54, here it says, "Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, man yartada minkum," which means that it's talking about turning away from the religion. If anybody turns, and then Warsh says yartadid. So yartadda and yartadid. It's irtidad or like rida. It's the same word with murtad.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's talking about yartadid and yartad. So some scholars have said that one of the variants is grammatically correct because it changes from, I think, feminine to something. And it affects, like, one of them is grammatically correct and one of them is, let's say, not as correct or not as flowing.
This is about us, by the way. This is the verse about us, the three of us here.
Yeah. So here again, in this one, it's if you open to Surah Baqarah, chapter 2, 140, Hafs says, taqulun inna Ibrahim. Now this is important, whereas Warsh says, yaqulun. So the problem here, the difference is, Allah is saying, or do you say, versus or do they say. And then he goes on about Ibrahim and Ismail and Ishaq. Now, why this is important? Who is claiming these things about Ibrahim, Ismail, Ishaq, and Yaqub? Is it Muhammad saying this, or is the kuffar? So what I'll do is I want to show you the
meaning.
Yeah, the translation. I should have put them in. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. You can just read it. We believe you.
Okay. So I found it here. So in Arabic, it says taqulun, do you say, in the modern Quran. But the other one is a yaqulun, or they say. So I'll read the translation. Or do you say that Abraham and Ismail and Isaac and Jacob and the descendants were Jews or Christians? Say, are you more knowing, or is Allah? So this is actually a very important variant, if you can see. Let me just share my screen.
Wow.
That's actually interesting.
That is wait. So you're saying the difference is between Muhammad saying it, or who was saying it? Was the alternative?
Who Allah is addressing?
Oh. No, but what was the alternative to Muhammad in this story?
Okay, so here you can see my screen now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes? So this is the word taqulun. Here you can see highlighted. It says you say or you do, but the other variant is yaqulun. They say, they do. So now if you read the verse, or do they say Abraham, versus or do you say?
Well, who's they? Who's they refer?
Exactly, right. Is it the Jews? Is it the Kuffar of Mecca?
The Kuffar of Mecca would say this, like instead of Muhammad. Isn't that the exact opposite
exactly?
of what? Holy
But then
shit!
the thing is, Allah tells Muhammad to reply to them in the other part is, "Qul antum a'lamu billah." Are you more knowing than Allah? So this verse in Hafs, it should have been yaqulun, or do they say, and Muhammad replies to them, "You know more than
Wait, so
Allah."
you think the halves the most
Is
makes less sense?
yes.
Yes.
Whoa!
The Warsh it clearly makes less sense because it should the way that all of this goes together. It really should say do they say this? Then in response to them, you can say blah blah blah, right?
So among all the variations of the modern Qur'ans, we're not even in the manuscripts right now. You're saying the one that is 95% there, the one that most Muslims are using, that variation is more not like makes less sense than the other variations right now. Where
When it comes to this particular verse,
this is amazing.
So what I want to show you is the verses prior. So here is say Allah commands Muhammad to argue. Do you argue with us about Allah is our Lord? To talk to them, okay? So then Muhammad keeps saying, "For us our deeds, for your deeds, and we are sincere indeed to him." So Muhammad spoke. Who should speak next to reply to him? It should be them, right? That's what I'm seeing here, at least from my side. Because it doesn't flow like you said. If Allah is quoting Muhammad, then it should be, or do they say Abraham and Jacob? And then Muhammad replies again. Well,
yeah, but is it the difference in significance because the source of one is Muhammad, and the worst, like the most opposite to Muhammad would be the infidels. So it's the difference between what something Muhammad would say or something the infidels would say.
Exactly.
And the most common Quran today, it seems like Muhammad is responding to somebody. So it should in both versions, it seems like Muhammad is responding to somebody, but in the most common Quran today, it's not the infidels, it's himself. So it's like, who are you fucking responding to? So the other Qurans makes more sense.
Yeah.
Right?
So
okay.
Let's go to the next one. This is Surah Al-Imran, chapter 3, verse 81. Taytukum, it reads in Hafs, and Taynakum. It doesn't change the meaning. It says we will give you versus in a I will give you, or it's a pronoun change. Again, the same thing here in Surah Nisa, chapter 4, verse 152. In Hafs, it says yu'tihim, and in Warsh it says nu'tihim. I give, we give. Here's the one that Armin was talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Surah Al-Imran, chapter 3, verse 146, where Hafs says, وَكَأَيٍّ مِّن نَبِيٍّ قَاتَلَ مَعَهُ. Whereas the Warsh says, وَكَأَيٍّ مِّن نَبِيٍّ قُتِلَ مَعَهُ. So one says that they fought, and the other can be translated to they were killed.
Okay.
So let's open let's open 3:146. Actually, one of you guys open it so I don't have to reshare.
I can't share two screens at the same time. Ali, you want to share?
Yeah,
I'll stop sharing.
You don't have to. No, we can just read it out. We don't have to share the verse.
Okay, so here's the. While you try to do that, I just want to mention this is exactly what you expect from a book that was man-made, right? Like, if you're a Muslim and you're listening to this, can you actually isn't it the more you learn about Islam, doesn't it seem less and less divine and more like man-made? Like, at some point, don't you want to be like, is the most simplest explanation of what's happening that this is just a whole bunch of verses made up by people?
We should really get to this verse because it's actually fascinating.
So look at this. And how many from a prophet fought with him?
Right.
Qutila means, and how many among the prophet were killed with him? Right? So this is one example where, it does affect the meaning a little bit, and it can lead.
Well, quite a bit.
Yeah,
180 degrees the other way around. Like, this is like, it can't get any more different.
But now here's the thing, right? The Muslim will say, well, the prophets fought. So obviously the fighting entailed killing, so they got killed.
Yeah.
Wait.
So that's their comeback, and
Say that
Yeah,
again.
come
Sorry,
back.
say that
They
last
won't say
part.
that when they fight with their spouses. I don't think.
So they said that the prophets were fighting, so obviously fighting would entail killing. Hence, the other reading would say that they were killed. But then again, it appears more to me again that the worst skeleton is the same. It's just that the person qatala mean qutala,
Yeah.
and they changed the word a little bit, and it means something slightly different. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll get back to the presentation now.
We could all resolve this by getting the copy of the Quran that's in heaven and just look at that. And
Exactly. So, which
which one of these variations are the copy of the Quran, the heavenly Quran, right?
Yeah, no.
Again, another qala and kul here. Surah Anbiya, chapter 21, verse 112.
The other one was also an Anbiya.
Yeah, the Anbiya surah is got its thing rolling with
like he was very I think he was a little drunk when he was doing that. There's a lot of wine in heaven.
Yeah. So Hafs says qala, which means Allah is quoting Muhammad. Rabbi ahkum bil haqq wa rabbuna ar-Rahman wal musta'an wa la ma tasifun. Whereas in the Warsh is again the dua. He's commanding him to say this dua. And it makes more sense for the Hafs version, where Muhammad said, "O Lord, judge between us with justice." It doesn't make sense for Allah to command Muhammad to pray to him to tell Lord to just between them with justice. Yeah. That's another thing with the flow. This one is a very interesting one, and I couldn't figure out why this would happen. So in Hafs, this word is repeated twice. It's the same word skeletally, okay? In the manuscript, it's one skeleton. Now in the Hafs, this verse repeats in the same verse twice, and in Hafs, it starts as yukhadi'un, but the second occurrence becomes yakhda'un. Okay?
Yeah.
But in the Warsh, the first occurrence is yukhadi'un, and the second occurrence is also yukhadi'un.
Oh.
So in one we can see that, I think the scribe misread it. And it doesn't make sense to have it has no value in this verse. There's absolutely no reason or any logical explanation to have this variant in there. And it's just, like I said, probably a probable scribal error that became part of the normative recital of the Qur'an. So Allah did protect it. Now is where the fun
we're getting to the juicy.
So I gotta say, that's a lot. Now you went through all of this, okay?
Manuscript.
And again, the Quran is it's a short book, and all of those things are different in different versions of the Quran.
There's some variants in the modern Quran, so which has caused quite a lot of problem, is arjulakum and arjulikum, and the verse talking about the ablution, wudu. So I'll tell you this now, the whole problem why Shias don't wash their feet versus Sunnis washing their feet is that variant reading.
The wamsahu, I remember
what's the variation the Shia
is it what's the word?
Arjulikum.
Arjulikum, yeah.
So because of that one pronunciation, the meaning changes to rubbing your feet or washing them, right? And
which variation? So Hafs is what Sunni use, and what's the Shia variation?
I'll have to find it. It's
how do I if I have a Quran in my hand, how do I see where it says Hafs? Right, this is probably a Hafs.
It normally says in the beginning, in the first page or on the cover, like Hafs and Asim or Shuba and Asim or Warsh and Nafi. I'll explain to you how so each of these teachers had about 2 or 3 transmitters, students that would go, and then so their chain is like 2 or 3 chains to the same teacher.
Okay, but we're getting into manuscripts now. This is the really juicy part is starting now.
So before we start, I just want to end on this, this stuff, all of these variants. You've only compared 2 of them, right?
I did, yeah. I've been only going through two. I think I covered Duri and Shuba once, but other than that, I've been just doing Warsh and Hafs. Wow. And I'll tell you something. I have a Mus'haf. This is printed by Muslims. It's got all the 10 readings in the margin, and I kid you not. And you can ask academics about this. These are just textual variants, there are variants in the thousands. I'm not joking. I have the book. The book has no page without a Quranic variant in it. And I'll even give you another one. So Hamia and Hamia in the famous verse where the sun sets in the muddy spring, that verse also has a variant.
Oh wow! Well, I mean, even more fundamentally, Surah Fatiha. You said the very first one, the one that everybody says in their prayer, Maliki
Yawmiddin
and Maliki Yawmiddin. So it's Maliki Yawmiddin and Maliki Yawmiddin. I mean, that's another variant as well. So in pronunciation, there is a question. I mean, this is a while ago. Someone had said to you in response when you were posting this stuff on Twitter. He said, "Thank you for this thread that actually proves how delicately the Quran is preserved." So after, I just want you to listen to that criticism in the context of everything that Abdullah has just presented to us with all these variants. That he's talking about how delicately the Quran is preserved to an extent that the qira'at document even the slightest variations in readings. That is called preservation. That does he have a point that, okay, all of these things, it's not just a preservation of one book, but all of these different variants have been preserved as they existed.
Yeah,
and they're there for you.
That is so moronic. I mean, if they call this, here, I have a question. The people that say, okay, this is okay, fine, they're all been preserved. I want to ask them what would it look like to them if it wasn't preserved? Right? Like, what would the Quran that is not preserved look like to them?
Well, what you can ask them in counter response is, okay, would you go out of your way to bring me these variants and then tell me, look, I got variants as proof of preservation? Would anybody do that? Obviously not.
Yeah. So anyway, so let's move on to the fun.
Juicy bit. Okay, this
is like a fight. Like, this is kind of like you fighting with them, like sparring with them, and you punching them in the face, like metaphorically, and they're like, "Oh, that was a strategic move. I wanted you to punch me exactly right there," and then you're like beating them in the ground, like they're like almost like they're instead of tapping out, like, "Aha, this is all strategic. This is all part of the plan." Like, this is like, you guys just don't understand how sophisticated these moves are right now. But go on. Okay, so like before we go to the manuscripts, can we provide some context about the history of what Muslims believe in, like the compilations of like Abu Bakr and Osman and Muhammad not writing anything down other than just a little bit of
and let's really quickly.
So let's do it quick. So Muhammad didn't formulate the Quran into a book in his lifetime. He died and he left his caliphs to deal with it. The surahs were allegedly in the right order and whatnot. So the caliphs then had to canonize the book because people were dying because it was just preserved orally. So they had this preservation. The initial copy was given to Muhammad's wife Hafsa. And then later on, there were more and more variants. So the first canonization, there's the thing, there's two canonization events that happened. The Hafsa one, then Osman took that Hafsa copy and then made a second one and then burned all the other Qur'ans and then circulated that. So
okay, who's Osman? Like, you have to like,
Osman
who's
is the third caliph. So the standardization
after Muhammad deaths. Okay.
Yeah. So it took a while and I think more than a decade. Like 650 is when the standardization happened, and Muhammad died in 632 AD. And what we're gonna find out is, what did he exactly burn? Why did he burn? And what was the crazy extent of the variance? And what I'm trying to tell you next segment, it destroys the myth that the Quran is preserved. It annihilates it.
Can I just add a little bit of history? I'll try to do it as fast as possible. Okay, so the understanding is, like, during Muhammad's life, most of the Quran was not written down. Some of it was written down on parchments and on bones, but most of it was memorized. Then when Muhammad died, for the first Caliph Abu Bakr, at first he didn't want to compile the whole Quran because he was like, why would I do something that Muhammad didn't do? You were supposed to follow the way of Muhammad, and if he didn't, we shouldn't do it. But then there was a battle. Most of the people, I don't know, a lot of the people who had memorized the Quran died, and then Omar came to Omar, who was the second Khalifa, but at that time he wasn't sent yet the second Khalifa. He came to Abu Bakr and said, like, look, people are fucking dying. We're gonna lose the Quran. You need to get this shit written down together. And we were like, fine, let's do it. And then he did it. But then the second Khalifa was Omar. Then Omar died. The third Khalifa, this is the famous compilation of the Quran. He had to recompile the Quran. Why? Why would you have to recompile the Quran? Maybe it seemed like there was a major disagreement about what was in the Quran and what was in the Quran. By the way, at the time, it's hadith. Like, this is part of authentic, accepted Islamic hadith that neither Abu Bakr and Osman, like, they both admit that a whole bunch of the Quran was missed and people forgot and people who remembered it died. And this compilation doesn't include a lot of those parts.
Oh yeah, hundreds of verses missing,
and entire chapters also were missing. The most famous funny one that we mentioned is the find that the Aisha had a part under her pillow, but when Muhammad died, they were so distracted with Muhammad, like in his burial and stuff, that I don't know if it's a sheep or a goat. A sheep came and ate those verses. And the reason why this is funny is because, I mean, this is a good thing, because those verses were the stoning of adulterers that was in the verse, which Omar, like, fuck, we can't, like, we have to keep stoning people. Like, why? I remember those verses, but also the breastfeeding of adults. That's also a verse that was eaten by a sheep. Yeah. But anyways, go on. Context. Go.
Okay, so we're coming to the manuscript. So we're going to be just looking at one manuscript. There's a lot. There's Birmingham Quran. There's the Topkapi manuscript. What's important to the Sana manuscript, the palimpsest, is because the Sana Quran has the upper text, and then it also has a lower text that you can see on the right side that can be extracted via UV lights.
Yeah. Can you explain what a palimpsest is, just for people who don't know?
So back in the day, these parchments or these papers or these leather skins, they were very, very hard to come by. And in fact, if you're making these, you have to, like, either kill a lot of animals and use their skin. So what people will do is they reuse them a lot. So a lot of times they will rub over and reuse that writing thing and write new stuff on top of it. Now, what you see in the Sana palimpsest is because of the ink they use and the metals in the ink, over time, the background that was rubbed off comes back into view. And if you shine UV lights, you can extract the lower text. Now, the staggering thing is, here's where it gets interesting. The lower text differs from the modern Quran significantly. Now, I'm going to drop a small history about the companions. So after Muhammad died, there was not one Quran. Every companion, or a lot of companions, had their own Quran. Not everyone. Ibn Masud has his own Quran. Ubayyah had his own Quran. Ali had his own Quran. And these Qurans differed quite significantly, where some of them would have extra 2 surahs. The surah orders were different. Some of them wouldn't even include the Fatiha and the 2 kuls. There were significant scandalous, actually scandalous variants recorded by Muslim scholars in books like Kitab al-Masahif by Ibn Abi Dawud. This is the same book Yasir Qadi named that gave him the crisis in those leaked emails. Then there are other books like Suyuti's Itqan al-Faris. And what was staggering is there was no evidence of these companion codices existing apart from those narrations until we found the Sana Quran. Because what happened is, when we read the lower text, we found what seems to be a companion codex, which has many variants that differ from Muhammad or from the standard Quran. And what's also amazing is the variants that are found in the lower text of this Quran also match some of the variants reported in the narrations, therefore putting a lot more truth to the idea that, yes, the companions did have differing codices.
Okay, so wow. We jumped into to this much faster than I thought.
Okay.
So, so this is, just to understand, we're looking at is one of the early manuscripts of the Quran.
Yeah.
My understanding is that there are 6 of them, and this is the Sana one. This is the Sana one.
Yeah.
Yes. But this is the more significant one, especially because there's 2 layers to it.
Yeah.
Like the other manuscripts, when you compare them to the Qurans today and to each other, they show variations. Like the manuscript, one manuscript is different from the other one, and all of them are different from the Qurans that we have today. Yeah. But this one is the most interesting one, because it's different from itself. Because there's one that is one text on top, and one text that was covered, that was under it, that you are, but what kind of lighting you use to be able to see the text under
UV,
it?
UV, yeah.
UV light. So it's contradicting. This is a text that is contradicting itself. You can see the progress in the canonization of people coming up with like this shows this is like a picture of people trying to decide what the Quran is. Like you have it in one document, the progress that the Quran made. That's why this is so damaging to the whole
it's kind of what they do even now in policing. Someone writes something on a piece of paper, then they erase it, and then they write something else. You can use techniques to find out what they originally wrote. So this is what they did. This is a palimpsest is a parchment. It's like an animal skin that has two layers, where the original one was washed away and was somehow deleted, and then they wrote on top of it. They reused it.
They didn't expect somebody many years later to be able to come up and find the text.
Exactly. Now, one thing also notice is none of them have any dots or vowel marking, barely any, right? So
none of them.
That's what we were talking about. That lends to more confusion as to where to put the dots, and hence some variance we saw.
But that's true about all the 6 manuscripts. In fact, even if you didn't have any dots. Yeah, go on, sorry.
If I was to tell you the details, like I was discussing with these academics, the Hafs Qur'an, which is the most popular Qur'an, is actually one of the least popular Qur'ans in the first few centuries of Islamic history. And what's even more interesting is like the early scholars never quote him. They quote Shubha's reading or some other guy's reading. So, and you can't, and a lot of the variants that you find in the Hafs Qur'an don't seem to have a skeletal backing in the manuscripts, whereas the other readings do. So this is a very interesting point, and this goes very deep. But what we'll start with the.
Wait, can we actually, before you talking about Sana? By the way, with all the differences that you mentioned when it comes to the modern Qurans, the differences, some of them were slight, some of them were a little bit more meaningful. But the differences that we're now looking at with the manuscripts, they are way more significant. These are different works. Like even like not just between the manuscripts.
I'll tell you that the worst sentence structures are changed. Sentences the words are moved around. Tense, passive, active, big omissions, big additions. It's too much. Like you'll see the next 20 slides are just full of that. So I just want to go. So there's a Sana 1 Qur'an that these are the 2 papers I'm using. I've just showed them. So if anybody needs to access them, they can find these online. So Benham Sadeghi and Bergman wrote the one on the Companion Codex. And then the Sana 1 was Benham Sadeghi and Mohsen Goudarzi. And they're from Stanford and Harvard University, respectively. Very, very, they're authorities on the subject, if anything. And they have offered one of the leading explanations. Now we're into it. So on the left side, we see that there's a table. So from here on out, we will refer to the Sana lower text as the C1 text, okay? Now, if you notice, we see that in Quran chapter 2, verse 196, the standard text that we have right now says, "Do not shave your heads until the offering reaches its destination." Okay, but the lower text of Sana does not have the word ru'usakum. Do not shave until the offering reaches its destination. So the word head is not there in the lower text. Okay, in the same verse, later on, in the standard version of the Quran, it says, "If any of you be sick," okay, which means "faman kana ahad." Whereas in the C1 it says "فَإِنْ كَانَ أَحَدٌ." So it's different. Lots of words added. Now,
just to be sure, the C1 is the lower Sana script, which is the older version.
Yes, the more closer to Muhammad's time.
Right. That's the older one.
Yeah, okay. And in the same verse, this one verse, 2196, has a lot of variants. The C1, the Companion Codex, has "aw nusukin" instead of "aw sadaqatin aw nusukin." So there's an additional phrase "aw sadaqatin" in the lower text. Sorry, I think I misread that. Yeah, so the lower text only has "aw nusukin" and the upper text has "aw sadaqatin" and "aw nusukin." So the lower text has an omission. or the upper text has an addition. So now we move on to chapter 2, verse 201. Here again, C1, which is the companion codex, reads wal akhirati instead of the traditional, which is hasanatin wa fil akhirati hasana. So I'll just read the translation. The standard text would read, there are people who say, our Lord, give us in this world, and they have no portion in the world to come. Then, so in the C1, it will say, our Lord, give us in this world and in the world to come. And what I'm trying to get to, if you can see, the fil akhirati hasana is the addition. If you can see, I think I can't highlight. Okay, oops.
Yeah, it's a give us good. So I think the difference here is that at the end of it, it says, and then there are those who say in the standard text that we have, it says, our Lord, give us good in this world and good in the next.
And good in the next.
The other one doesn't have the good. It just says, our Lord, give us in this world and the next.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now, in Surah 63, verse 7, we see this again, that the companion codex has min hawlihi after the word yanfaddu, whereas that does not, in the standard text, do not spend alms on those who are with the messenger of God in order that they may disperse. So the last part in the standard tradition says that they may disperse, but the Sivan has an additional phrase, min hawlihi, which means from around him, added to it.
An entire phrase.
Yeah, an entire phrase. Now, this is on the right side, the table 4, where C1 agrees. Now, this is what I'm trying to tell you. There were variants reported in these books that were leading up to why Uthman burned. They show you scandalous variants. We found some of those variants in the lower text, meaning that yes, there's a lot of chances that there's a lot of truth that there were many Qur'ans, and the Sahaba disagreed and they had their own codices. So here we see in chapter 2, verse 270, the Osmanic Quran says qitalan fihi, whereas the C1 says wa'an qitalan fihi. So there's addition an and wa'an. And what we are told that from the reading of Ibn Mas'ud, it matches. Then they ask you about the holy month, about fighting in it, and it matches that. Now in Surah 2, this is very important. This is a major. If you can see, verse 222 talks about approaching women with their menstruation, but the sentence structure is so flipped in this one, in the lower text. Okay, so the modern text reads فَأْتَزِلُهُنْ نِسَاء فِي الْمَهِيدِ وَلَا تَقْرَبُهُنَّ حَتَّى يَطَهَّرْنَ. Whereas the C1 reads فَلَا تَقْرَبُوا النِّسَاء فِي الْمَهِيدِهِنْ حَتَّى يَتَطَهَّرْنَ. So there's a lot of tense changes. The words have been moved around a little bit. So the translation goes, in the Osmanic text, avoid sexual relationships with women during menstruation and do not go to them until they're clean. It flips and starts the other way around. Do not go to women during their menstruation until they're clean, in C1. And then in the narrations that reported us, back the one preferred by Ibn Mas'ud. So we can see that it matches some of the hadith or narrations as well. And this one is a sentence structure change, where the sentence is being moved around, words are being moved around, passive, active, whatnot.
Well, it's a whole difference in meaning.
Yeah, totally.
The Uthmanic one is saying that avoid sexual relationships with women during menstruation. And the older version, the Asana C1, is saying don't go to women during their menstruation. It's not saying...
It's the same. It's not the same.
Which is, I think, probably the one that women would prefer.
All right. So now we are at some major variants. Okay. So what from now on will mostly be seen is on the left side it'll be first Osmanic text, in the middle C1, and on the corner you'll explain the.
Just to be clear, allegedly Osmanic text, because we don't have any manuscripts that could be traced to Osman itself. This is just a claim by Muslims.
Yeah. Okay. Now, in the Osmanic text, we see in in Surah 5, verse 45, وَكَتَبْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ. Okay? But in C1, we see وَكَتَبْنَا عَلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل. So them versus, we sent upon the Bani of Israel, the people of Israel. So there's a whole different 2-3 words added to it. And what's interesting is that ala Bani Israel actually matches the one reported for a few Sahabis. Now in verse 63:7, we already talked about the disperse. And the Osmanic Quran is just as yanfaddu sivan sa yanfaddu min hawlihi. The quotation of the verse in a hadith is identical to sivan. So this was definitely a companion's codex reading there. So there's like 3 letters added. So now we get to some major elements. So it will explain to you some like what's happening. So in 541, it says that the word order changes. So the Osmanic text says walahum fil akhirati, and the Sivan says wa fil akhirati lahum. Like boop, it's flipped. And then in the next verse in 2:196, the example, another verb but same root. So it says istaysara and tayassara. So Osman says istaysara and tayassara for C1. Now, in the other one, it says verb conjugated for different person. So, Surah 15, verse 65, tu'maruna, ya'maruna. Again, here we see a different form of plural. So, in 543, the Osmanic text reads al-nabiyuna, whereas C1 says al-anbiya. Okay?
Yeah. It's not even. It's not. This is like not like we previously were talking about. Oh, there's a dot here missing. Yeah. Oh, the fair looks like a there. But now we're talking about. Oh, this entire word is different.
No, dude, it gets really bad. Just keep watching.
Okay.
Oh my God.
So, verb tensor mood. So in 552, Surah 5, verse 52, in Osmanic, that says فَيُصْبِحُ. And in C1, it says فَيُصْبِحُونَ. So again, extra letters. The next example, active versus passive. So in Surah 5, verse 47, Allah says in the Osmanic text, Anzalallahu fihi. In C1, it says, Unzila alayhim fihi. What's happening is, Anzalallahu, Allah reveals in it, and it says, it was sent upon them in it. So it's like it says, it's changing the active to passive. Now let's go to the next one. Here we have some more changes. So we see another word order transposition in Surah 3, verse 156. The Osmanic text reads, Wallahu bima ta'maluna basir, whereas the Ibn Masud text reads, Wallahu basirum bima ta'malun. Right? So they're just comparing some differences between the variations from Ibn Masud and Osman. Then there's the synonymous verb here in Surah 2, verse 202. It says in Osman, kasabu, where Ibn Masud says, iktasabu. Again, in 283, Surah 2, verse 83, Osman says, ta'buduna, and Ibn Masud says, ya'buduna. Then there's a different form of plural in Surah 13, verse 42, where Osman says, li kufaru, and Ibn Masud says, li kafiruna. Then again in Surah 34, verse 37, the singular plural changes. Li ghurfati and ghurfati in Ibn Masud's. I don't think I read that correctly. Ghurfati and ghurfati. Okay. In tense and mood chain in Surah 17, verse 54, tusabbihu, sabahat. Those are quite different sounding. Then again, active versus passive. Surah 32, verse 17, qala a'lamu. Now we get to, those were some word changes, but now we're getting to omissions, phrases, words, major ones on the right side. So we talked about this, but this will, when it puts it into, this paper writes it in Arabic, so it becomes easier for people to realize how big the variant is. So in Surah 2, verse 196, we've talked about this. Usman says, وَلَا تَحْلَقُوا رُؤُوسَكُمْ. And C1 says, وَلَا تَخْلِقُوا. It's completely omitted the word رُؤُوسَكُمْ. Okay? Now...
And Rusa, by the way, this was the meaning where it said, where the Osmanic version, the one we have now, says, do not shave your heads until, whereas the C1 actually says, just do not shave.
And you can say, okay, well, do not shave what? So you can see that
anything. Don't save anything.
So then that goes on back to, okay, well, like it's being specific and
feature,
clarifying later. So here we have another one. In a
So wait, so the earlier ones just wasn't clear. The later one was clearer.
Yeah,
they're just different meanings.
I know there's different meanings because, like, but it's very interesting because again, this is what you would expect if this was man-made. That somebody looked at it like, this needs some clarification. Let's clarify this. You know what I mean? Like it's that, like the changes are exactly in line of how you would expect things to change if humans were changing it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Exactly. Now here again in Surah 2 verse 196 we see that in the Osmanic text it says min siyamin aw sadaqatin aw nusuk. But in the lower text it just says min siyamin aw nusuk. Aw sadaqatin is missing. It's omitted. Now we won't go to the details. This guy, if you are wanting to, he goes into the nitpicking details, like which one flows better, which one is grammatically correct, and which one makes more sense. But we will just go to the Arabic variants. We talked about this as well. So 201, Surah Baqarah, verse 201. The standard Osmanic text reads "Fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana," whereas the Sivan reads "Fid dunya wal akhirah." So hasana is omitted. Now, if we go to Surah 2, verse 213, we see that the Osmanic text has this word, bughyanihim, I feel it says, and it's not even existent in the C1 lower text. It's not there. Then in Surah 2, verse 213, Allazina khalaw min qablikum is from Osman. And C1 says, Allazina min qablikum. So the word khalaw is not even present in the lower text.
So there's entire omissions of words. In this, do you know, with this one, because we don't have the English over here, but do you know how this changes the meanings of these verses? Because if you're skipping entire words...
Oh, yeah. Actually, if you want, this guy, what he does is he does give the meanings at times, and also just give a little brief breakdown.
Because I think we get the idea that there's omission in words, but it would be if we have that, it'd be amazing.
What you can do is one of you guys can open the Qur'an app and then read the verse translation, and then we can see what was omitted, and then we can see what was missing from the translation.
We don't need to go through all of them. Can we just do the most significant ones?
Yeah, so I'll go to the better one. So here's this one in Surah 2, verse 217. The Osmanic text says, "Yuridukum yaruddukum an dinakum." The word yaruddukum is missing. And then here, verse 218 from Surah 2, it says, in Osman, "Inna lazina amanu wa lazina hajaru wa jahadu." Whereas in the C1, it says, "Inna lazina amanu wa hajaru." So, wa lazina wa hajar is missing. So there's huge omission there. In the left one, we see in 2221, Osmanic text read, al-maghfiratu bi-izni, meaning by his leave, whereas the word bi-izni is missing, by his leave, in the lower text. We already talked about the Surah 2, verse 222, about periods and the sexual intercourse. So we will move on to the next one. So this one is quite big, actually. If you see the Osmanic text read, فَإِنْ جَاءُوكَ فَحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُم. But the C1 just read فَحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُم. Like there's like فَإِنْ جَاءُوكَ. The whole first part's not even existent there.
Yeah. And what is that? What does that mean?
So judge between us, and the Osmanic text reads, and when he came to us to judge between us, whereas he says just judge between us in the C1. So the first phrase is missing. Let me just have
where it says so the verse here is, so if they come to you, O Muhammad, judge between them or turn away from them.
Yeah. So what you can do is just keep like the Quran.com open.
Yeah. So what you're saying is the part that's missing is, so if they come to you.
Yeah. That's not there.
So it's just telling them judge between them or turn away from them,
whether
they come to you or not.
Yeah.
So, and these are listeners to false. So the full verses, they're avid listeners to falsehood, devourers of what is unlawful. So these are basically sinners, infidels. if they come to you, then judge between them or turn away from them. But in the older text, right, which seems probably more authentic, it doesn't say if they come to you. It says, whether they come to you or not, just judge between them or turn away from them. It's a little more, wow, that's really interesting.
And there's so many, we'll skip the ones here because they're not that significant, but coming to the next page, you can see, oops. So these are the additions that are...
These are entire phrases.
Well, quite literally, holy shit. I mean, this is... Yeah. So
in 2:193, this is actually quite interesting. In the Osmanic text, it says وَيَكُونَ الدِّينَ لِلَّهِ. But the C1 says وَيَكُونَ الدِّينَ كُلُّهُ لِلَّهِ, which basically means all of the religion belongs to Allah. In the Osmanic text, it says the religion belongs to Allah, and it says kulluhu means the additional. Now, what is also important is the entire sentence in Sivan occurs elsewhere in Osman in other places. So the word kulluhu would have been expected here for somebody familiar with the language of the Quran. So they're saying that the Osmanic Quran is probably missing the word, and it's not correct. C1 is what should have been. So this scribe might have missed out because there's وَيَكُونَ دِينَ كُلُّهُ لِلَّهِ is repeated in the Osmanic Quran already in that form. So that difference in form doesn't make sense. We did talk about Surah 2, verse 200.
Let's go to 544.
Yeah, so the 544 is quite intense. Yeah. So the Osmanic reading reads لِلَّذِينَ هَادُوا وَالرَّبَّانِيُّونَ وَالْأَحْبَارَ بِمَا اسْتَحْفِظُوا مِنْ كَتَبَ اللَّهُ وَكَانُوا عَلَيْهِ شَهِيدًا شَهْدًا. Can't see that. But
this is about the Jews, by the way.
Yeah. If you could open this one now says in the C1 is quite staggering. It says وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا يَحْكُمُونَ بِمَا نَزَّلَ اللَّهُ فِيهَا يَحْكُمْ بِهِ. Whoa, what the hell happened here? There's a lot of additions in this one.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just read. This is
like a paragraph.
I want to know what this means because here's the verse. The verse says that the Uthman version is, indeed, we sent down the Torah in which was guidance and light. The prophets who submitted to Allah judged by it for the Jews, as did the rabbis and scholars by that with which they were entrusted the scripture of Allah, and there were witnesses there too. So do not fear the people, but fear me, and do not exchange my verses for a small price. And whoever does not judge by what Allah has revealed, then it is those who are the disbelievers. So
okay, and what does the earlier version say?
A whole bunch of extra stuff.
So the earlier version says وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا يَحْكُمُونَ. So those who judge, it says, with what Allah has revealed in it from so يَحْكُمُونَ بِمَا نَزَّلَ اللَّهُ فِيهَا. So they judge by what Allah has revealed in His book by His leave. So the whole phrase يَحْكُمُونَ بِمَا نَزَّلَ اللَّهُ فِيهَا and another phrase يَحْكُمُ بِهِ is an addition. It is not found in the Osmanic Quran, but is found in the companion Quran, lower text. That is
so that's huge. But can you explain the difference between the message here?
So what's happening is it's saying that the additional part is, I'll just translate that, is those who judge from what Allah has revealed in His book from His leave. That's the part that's missing in what it seems in the Osmanic current Quran. And actually it talks about it a little here, is a similar phrase appears in the next verse as well. Therefore, the additional terms in Sivan mirror language that repeats 5 times in close proximity to the spot in question, therefore would not be unexpected. Oh, wow. Okay, so the C1 is better than the Osmanic Quran, I think is what it said here. That's quite interesting.
Do you have any theories on why somebody would change this?
Like I said, if you were to deep dive into the companion codices, there's different amounts of variations, and that's what the point is. Like, because of this much discrepancy, it completely now starts to make sense why Osman had to take such a huge step to burn everything else.
Right. No, but I'm pretty sure there's a story behind all of these changes.
It's
like
probably from the reading of Ibn Masud, a Sahabi that got abrogated, but a lot of the Sahaba would keep the abrogated or cancelled readings still part of their codex.
Right. So just to mention what you just explain a little bit what you just said. What Osman, what the story says is that Osman saw that there's a whole bunch of different versions going around, different ahrufs, right?
Yeah.
7 ahrufs. I think that
we'll get to that in a little bit, because it's a very confusing discussion, because some people say qira'at ahruf are interchangeable, some say no.
Okay, so let's say versions. Let's say versions for simplification. 7 different versions, and Osman is like, at first they were like, this is fine, because I mean, I don't know if this is a new claim or if this is an old claim, but they're saying like, well, Muhammad did this so that different people with different accents and different cultures could read the Quran differently. But then there was conflict between Muslims over the different Qurans. So Osman was like, okay, let's pick just one of them and burn the rest of them. I don't know why I get so much shit for burning the Quran, given that Osman burned a whole bunch of copies of Quran, and including in the versions that he burned was some of the earlier versions of the Quran. Like he actually decided to leave one of so some of the Qurans that he burned, some of the versions that he burned was closer to Muhammad than the one that he decided to keep, which is weird. Yeah. But they say the reason why he decided to do that is because of the different, so that everybody could read it in one, there's only one dialect, right? But this is the explanation that Bukhari gives for him burning the Quran, the other Qurans, which doesn't make any sense. Because the Osman, at the time of Osman, according to all Islamic scholars today and always, right, there was no dots or vowels at his time. That came like 200 years later. So if the reasoning was that everybody has the same reading of the Quran, you wouldn't be able to achieve that with the text, Arabic text at the time of Osman. It doesn't matter how many burning he did. Only the skeletal part would be the same. Yeah. And the skeletal part being the same will still let people have their different readings of it, because they had no idea where the vowels are or where the dots are. So it seemed like Bukhari, the hadith of Bukhari, was writing history based on his understanding of what the Quran was at his time. So this is absolute proof, correct me if I'm wrong, that the hadith writers were inventing history, because
there's a huge argument amongst people where they say that the whole hadith about the ahruf was a post hoc concoction,
right,
to back project to save this mess that we are just seeing now. It's kind of like damage control.
Yeah, but that's based on their lack of understanding of what the Quran looked like at the time of Uthman. Because his explanation for what was happening do not make sense if he knew that the Quran at the time of Uthman had no dots and vowels on it.
Yeah.
Like, is it because he didn't know?
No, because I think at that time the Arabic language hadn't developed. I think the vowels are put by Hajjaj ibn Yusuf way later. I think than in 8.
But it was was there at the time of Bukhari. Like, it was there.
Bukhari he came 200 years after Muhammad. So by that time they had a manuscripts and a written copy of the Quran.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, the explanation that he was giving seemed like he assumed that the Quran at the time of Uthman looked like the Quran at his time.
Yeah.
Like, so he was just he was just his, and that to me it seemed like this is obvious that he was just writing history instead of like as he wanted it to be, rather than how it was.
Yeah.
Like, this is inventing history. This is proof of invention of history by Muslims many years later.
Yeah, well, there could be another, to be a little bit more charitable to it. I mean, this is on the same page that you're showing at the bottom of the left hand page, where it talks about the phrase "katabna ala bani Israila." It says it occurs in Quran, the verse 532, shortly before the verse that they're discussing, 545. So the proximity of this occurrence makes it easy to see how the addition in C1 could be a false memory harking back to the earlier use. So what could potentially, there's another explanation. Some of these cases, is that the older text,
Is
C1,
wrong. Yeah.
right, had repetitions of words or phrases that appeared elsewhere, and then maybe they got confirmation. No, if it's supposed to be elsewhere, this is a repetition.
But
let's get it out and rewrite it. So in some of those cases, it does seem like this was not necessarily an alteration. The shaving your head seems like they actually added it in. This is all speculation. But in some of these cases, it could be that they just thought they're like, oh, okay, there's a repetition here. We have to fix this.
Yeah.
Ali, but this doesn't negate anything I said with regards
No, it doesn't.
to.
I'm not trying to negate it. I'm just adding to it.
No, but because what you're saying is whatever the goal of Osman was for burning the other Qurans and coming up with one dialect, the explanations that Muslims gave 200 years later does not make any sense, and it shows that their lack of understanding of what the Quran looked like 200 years before.
We'll get to the whole fiasco of what ahruf are at the end. As like how many opinions and the confusion, but let's keep going with this.
Let's do one thing, Abdullah. Because I think we get the. I mean, there's so many of these that we got from being mindful.
I'll just skim through them. You can just look at them for 2 seconds. And if any big ones, I'll point out.
Yeah. So let's focus on, because the people who are listening to this just on audio, because they're hearing the Arabic and the translation isn't really there in all instances. So let's just kind of go through the ones that are.
Okay, so I'll just read the additional parts. So in Surah 63, verse 3, the lower text had the additional phrase ثُمَّ ازْدَادُوا كُفْرًا that is not found in the standard text. And in the same verse later on, the lower text says ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ قَوْمٌ as an extra phrase, which is not found in the Osmanic text. We'll just skip the next 2 or 3 because it's the same surah, but we get the gist. Words. Now in the next one, in Surah 2, verse 196, we see substitution of words. So in the Osmanic text, it says فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيدًا, whereas in C1 it says فَإِنْ كَانَ أَحَدًا مِنْكُمْ مَرِيدًا. So the word ahad, anyone, is an extra addition in C1, lower text of Sana. Now there's some substitutions as well. We won't go to them, but there's one where we'll go to Surah 2, verse 209, whereas the Osmanic text says جَاءَتْكُمُ الْبَيِّنَاتِ, come with the proofs, whereas the C1 says جَاءَكُمُ الْهُدَى, I come with the guidance.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 different things.
Yeah, and so one of the verses that's interesting is Surah 5, verse 46. In the Osmanic text, it says, نُورٌ وَمُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ مِنَ التَّوْرَاةِ, it seems. Where in the C1 it says, نُورٌ وَمُصَدِّقًا لِمَا أَنزَلَ مِنَ التَّوْرَاةِ. So the بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ is synonymous with أنزلنا, as we sent forth with your hand and we revealed it down. Again, on the right side, we see these are the synonyms. So in Surah 5, verse 49, Osman says Anzal Allah, whereas C1 says Uhi Allah is a substitution. And
what does that mean?
It's the same thing. Anzal Allah means Allah sent down, and Uhi Allah means Allah revealed.
Okay.
Yeah. So in Surah 63, verse 4, we see that وَإِذَا رَأَيْتَهُمْ, where in the Osmanic text, but in C1 it's substituted with pardon me, it says وَإِذَا جَاءُكَ. So there's a substitution here. Now we won't go too much in detail. These are just a bunch of words that are different, and these are the major words. There's minor variations too, so I'll just read a few. So singular.
Well, a lot of these are very.
We've already covered a lot.
Ahruf and everything. It's like the other things that we covered. So for the audience that's listening, they're very similar, like phonetic differences, singular, plurals, things like that. These are some of the minor elements.
Yeah, and then a list of minor other ones as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of these.
There's too many. Like what? We will close up this section, and I think we're almost near the end of our presentation now.
Mm-hmm.
There are some few things that we want to touch on, but go on.
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first thing is like I will ask you guys both of you a question after seeing this section of the manuscripts. Do you feel like is there any possible, sensible, rational way to even try to entertain the possibility of perfect preservation?
Perfect.
Should I put my ex-Muslim hat on or the Muslim side hat on?
Let's put on the ex-Muslim. There's enough people with Muslim.
No, of course, fucking not. Like, are you kidding me? Oh yeah, ex-Muslim hat on. Like, are you serious? Is that even a question? Like, come on. Like, if this is preservation, if this is preservation, tell me exactly how not preservation, like lack of preservation. What would that look like? Like,
yeah. So now we're gonna quickly go through some hadith about some lost verses, and these generally don't directly have an impact on the ahruf, but they do tie in the holistic picture, because what I'm trying to show is every step of the Quranic way you have problems. The modern Quran's variants, the manuscripts variants, Osman burning and whatnot. Let's start with this. So here we just recount a hadith from Sahih al-Bukhari why Osman burned the Quran. So, O chief of the believers, save this nation before they differ about the book, as the Jews and Christians did before. So the Muslims are scared that it'll get corrupted like the Bible. So then Muhammad appointed this guy Zayd, and he compiled the Quran in the Qurayshi dialect. And once he had written, at the end of it, he ordered all the Qur'ans to be burned, even fragments of the Quran to be burnt. So what would constitute such a mess? We can now see from the previous sections.
All except the one. All except the half.
All except the Hafs, okay. There's actually academics, Dr. Shazad Salim actually argues that the Hafs is the only true one.
Right. And to be clear, the Hafs was even like is that the name of the person? Like, why is they calling it the Hafs?
It's the transmitter. So Hafs and Asim, right? So it was Asim and Hafs heard from him and he transmitted it forward. We'll get to it short after.
Okay, and Aisha had to say, and she changed some of the verses. They're going to mention that.
Oh yeah, we will mention that. So we see first that Uthman burnt the Qur'ans because it was being changed. Now here we come to staggering revelation. Surah Ahzab, which is Surah 33, only now has 73 verses, but it used to be the same size as Baqarah, which was 286 verses right now.
Wait.
So there's 200 verses that used to be part of this surah that are no longer found in the Quran that were once revealed.
Jeez Christ.
Yeah. And I'm not even joking. So this is with the abrogation, and this is straight up from the Muslim Islam QA website. This is so I don't have enough to.
This is not part of the ex-Muslim Zionist.
No,
this come from the Islamic scholars themselves.
Yeah. So this hadith is so widely reported. Just listen to this. It's in Ahmad's Musnad. It's in Abdul Razak's Musannaf. It's in Ibn Imban's Sahih. It's in Hakim's Mustadrak. It's in Al-Bayhaqi's Sunan. It's in Ibn Hazm's Muhalla. It's just like everywhere. So
it can't get more authentic than this.
And before we get says this is a clearly Sahih hadith isnad, as clear as the sun. There is no fault in it. It's what Ibn Hazm said. So what is this scandalous revelation we're being told? So Ubay bin Ka'b said to me, how long is Surah Ahzab when you read it? Or how many verses do you think it is? I said to him, 73 verses. He said, only? There was a time when it was long as Surah Al-Baqarah, and we read in it, the old man and the old woman, if they commit zina, stone them both, a punishment from Allah, and Allah is Almighty, most wise. So this surah is missing hundreds of verses. This really puts a question mark on if we have the Quran that was uttered by Muhammad or not.
So they would say that God did this on purpose. right? But if like these were meant to be there for a while and then God removed them for a while, and the response to that would be, well, then you could, when you say preserved and then we show you that it's not preserved, and you're like, well, God did that on purpose, and what is so special about, like, well, then you could excuse
Exactly.
everything that we show you that is not preserved. You could be like, well, that was part of God's plan. So
Exactly.
how is it even possible for us to show you that it's not preserved?
One of the fascinating things, the point you just raised up, Muhammad Hijab posted on his Twitter saying that if you were to view it from the Muslim perspective, the Quranic preservation is an unfalsifiable claim.
Okay, then what's the point?
Exactly.
Right.
But then they also tell us to verify the Quran's preservation to prove its miraculousness. It makes no sense.
Yeah. So what's so special about it? Oh my God.
So here is just to show you the extent of how the Sahaba were fighting each other. Okay.
Right.
One of the things you need to take from this is that when Zayd bin Sabit is appointed to find the Quran verses, he was told that he has to look for witnesses and have at least 2 witnesses before he adds a verse in the manuscript, right? And then he came across this one verse where he didn't have as many witnesses as he wanted, but he wasn't sure about the spelling of the verse. So here it says they differed with at-tabut and at-tabu, right? So then Osman said that write it as tabut in the Qurayshi dialect, for the Quran was revealed in the tongue of the Quraysh. So wait a minute. He's saying the Quran is revealed in the tongue of the Quraysh. Does that mean only the Qurayshi dialect is true? Or are the ahruf all variations within the Qurayshi dialect, or are they variations outside of the Qurayshi dialect in other dialects, right? So here's where the confusion really starts. Now, but what we need to take away from this narration is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, who was literally the Quran master. Him and Ubay bin Ka'b, they were told by Muhammad that if you want the Quran, go to these 2 people. And what happens is, look what Abdullah ibn Mas'ud says. He says, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud disliked Zayd bin Sabit copying the Mus'haf, meaning he disliked Zayd canonizing the Osmanic Quran. And he said, "Oh, you Muslim people, I am removed from recording the transcription of the Mus'haf, and it is overseen by a man, by Allah. When I accepted Islam, he was but in the loins of a disbelieving man," meaning Zayd bin Sabit. And it was regarding this that Abdullah bin Masud said, "O people of Al-Iraq, keep the masahif that are with you and conceal them. For indeed Allah said, whoever conceals something, he shall come with what he has concealed on the day of judgment. So meet Allah with the masahif." Az-Zuhri said, "It was conveyed to me that some men amongst the most virtuous of the companions of the Messenger of Allah disliked that view of Ibn Masud."
Wait. So let me get this clear. Tell me if this is what's happening. Right. So this guy is like, these motherfuckers are like preserving the wrong version of the Quran. I have the right version of the Quran. They're coming after, like these idiots are burning out like the Qurans that are actually legit. And the fucker that they picked for, his Quran, it was a kafir when I was a Muslim. So fuck him and his Quran, and hide your wives and hide your Qurans, because they're coming after the right versions of the Quran, and we have to save the Quran, right? That's what he was saying?
Yes, that is exactly what you heard, Matt.
Okay, so okay.
It's like they're just fighting. Like, I'm like, no, like, hide your thing. What's interesting is, like, I was thinking about this. We haven't still found Ibn Masud codex, but academics believe that there are definitely some survived, because the traditions say that his readings were used for legal ruling centuries later, or actually it's a few years later. But the point is, the Sahaba are fighting so much with each other. It looks so bad on them. So let's go to the next one. We will go to about the verses about breastfeeding that no longer exist. On the left side, we see that in Sahih Muslim, it says that heard Aisha discussing fosterage, which makes marriage unlawful, and she said, there was revealed in the Holy Quran 10 clear sucklings and then 5 clear sucklings. On the right side, we see Imam Malik's Muwatta, one of the earliest hadith books and one of the most sahih ones as well. He says that amongst what was sent down of the Quran was 10 known sucklings make haram, and then it was abrogated and became known as 5 sucklings. And when the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, died, it was what is now recited of the Quran. And Yahya said that Malik said one does not act on this. So even Imam Malik is admitting, yes, these verses were eventually once sent down. They existed in the Quran. They were recited by the people, but we don't act on this.
Yeah. So the suckling. They're talking about the threshold of the number of times you, I guess, swallow your wife's breast milk by mistake. So you're married and okay. So I got it. So there's how many times you have to swallow your wife's breast milk before your marriage vows become invalid?
Yeah,
and you become relatives.
So there's literally a comedy of backdrop hadith for this. There's a few incidents that I'll just quickly summarize. There was this one lady who had adopted.
Sorry, before you mention this, can we provide context for why? Okay, so but the understanding is this the verse that says that if you drink a woman's milk, you're basically her son now?
Yeah, and you can't marry her. Yeah, and you have to.
All right, so basically, like the understanding is that drinking another woman's milk technically makes you her son, and men and women are haram to each other. Like they can't touch each other, look at each other unless they're married or unless they're family. So if you all of a sudden drink another woman's milk and you become her son, now she's not haram to you anymore. She's not forbidden to you anymore because she's your mom. Right, you could look at her, you could like see her without hijab and stuff like that, and this is and also you can't have sex with her because she's your mom now. You can't have sex with your mom, right?
Yeah.
And this is this context that we're talking about. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So just to quickly summarize, there was an incident where a lady adopted this boy, but when the boy grew up, he was not her mahram because Islam doesn't abolish adoption. So the lady's like, the guy is growing up and he is maturing, and I can see signs of sexual attraction on his face towards me. Oh, Prophet of Allah, what should I do? So Muhammad's genius idea was, go suckle the guy. So the lady replies in the hadith, I can't suckle him, he's a grown man. And Muhammad laughs and says, go do it.
Mm-hmm.
So his idea is to get this guy to stop having sexual desires for this lady is to go suck his boobs.
So wait, so he will. So basically, this man is following her, and he's not supposed to because they're haram, they're forbidden to each other. But Muhammad's solution was like just drink her milk, and now you could be with each other. But they can. But the problem also is that if
you can't be with each other. You can't.
You can be with each other, but you can't fuck each other.
Yeah.
Right. But you can't
in the same room. Yeah.
You're mahram. You're not forbidden. You can be in the same room. She doesn't have to wear hijab. You could look at her, follow her. You just can't fuck her because she's your mom. But but the problem is that if you are married and you accidentally drink your wife's milk, your marriage is now invalid because you can't be married to your mom. Another situation was like there was at the time of Omar. This is after Muhammad was dead. When Omar was the second caliph, there was this woman that was very upset with her husband because he was constantly having sex with the sex slave. So the wife's solution was to give the sex slave some of her milk, and then when the husband came home, she told the husband, like, guess what? She's our daughter now. So you can't have sex with our daughter. And the guy was upset. So he went to Omar and he said, like, what do I do? Is she my daughter right now? And Omar said, like, no, that was for the time of the Prophet. It's not valid anymore. And go beat up Omar told the man to go beat up your wife for doing this to you.
And keep having sex with the slave.
Keep having sex with the slaves and also beat your wife for doing this to you. Also, but another weird story is that Aisha, because she was a leader of an army when Muhammad died, she decided to raise an army against Ali. This is Aisha is Muhammad's favorite wife. But she needed to command men, like there were generals in the army, and she needed to talk to. And all of these men were forbidden to him, so she couldn't talk to them, and she couldn't be in the same room as them. And also, she didn't have any milk because she wasn't pregnant. So she got her pregnant sisters. She basically farmed her sisters to basically breastfeed all of these like generals.
I have the hadith.
so that so now they're family, and she could talk to them. Like this, this story. This story is so weird. Like, I imagine like having her sisters in the yard, and like they're like having this whole milking thing going on, and the generals
freak show.
Oh my god!
Oh, it's a freak show now. All right, let's get going.
Okay, go
yeah, the thing is, like, this abrogation thing is interesting because there's different kinds of it. There's one where the verse is in the Quran, but you don't follow it anymore. Then there are others where the verse is no longer in the Quran, like Rajam, but you still follow it.
Yeah, which is pointless.
Which is like the stoning to death for adultery.
Yeah.
And then you have the ones that are, that are not in the Quran, and you don't follow them, and those we don't even know what we don't know. So it's like it's just it's.
This is. So in this one here on the left, it says, the chapter name: if the son of Adam had two valleys, he would desire a third. So we used to recite a surah which resembled in length and severity to Surah Bara, which is Surah 9. I have, however, forgotten it with the exception of this, which I remember out of it. If there were two valleys full of riches for the son of Adam, he would long for a third valley, and nothing would fill the stomach of the son of Adam but dust. So this was apparently, according to some people, part of a surah verse, but we do not find it anywhere in the current Quran. On the right side, we see delivering a sermon. The Prophet said, "Oh men," the Prophet used to say, "if the son of Adam were given a valley full of gold, he would love to have a second one. Nothing fill it up for his dust. And Allah forgives who repents to him." Ubay said, so Ubay bin Ka'b is, I think, what's being referred to, one of the king qurra of the Quran. We considered this as a saying from the Quran till the surah mutual rivalry, blah, 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 revealed. So this was apparently part of the Quran, but again, is not found anymore. But again, like a lot of the time, you'll see that there's some verses that are revealed and canceled, but they have absolutely no point. Like, if you left this verse in the Quran, what would it change?
Well, I mean, that's what he's saying. He's like, verse 102:1 says, the mutual rivalry for piling up of worldly things diverts you. They're like, when we found out that this surah was there, then we didn't consider the old one a surah of the Quran anymore. So, they're like, okay, whatever it says. I mean, there was a lot of editorializing that was going on, which is still very common in publishing today among human mortals. So
actually, on that point that Ali just mentioned, what basically we've seen so far is that it's not just that the Quran was not preserved; it's that it changed. And the changing never stopped.
Yeah.
Like, it constantly changed. Like, you can see that from Muhammad's time to Abu Bakr's time, it was changing. For Abu Bakr's time to Osman's time, it was changing. And after the manuscript shows that after Osman's time, it was constantly being removed. Stuff was being removed, added, changed. And all the way to the modern time, even today, we see with the modern Qurans, there's variations and changes. So you can't get more constant change than what we're saying right now.
Like, every step of the way, Allah, if he's trying to protect it, he purposefully made it seem like every step of the way there was human involvement. He's testing our iman, So here's the stoning verse. Like I said, this one is very clear, and you actually have the verse itself in the hadith, which was once there. So Umar bin Khattab, for some reason, this guy was very pushy on the stoning verse. I must say, this guy was like, I want to write it down. I don't want people to go astray. But he recited the verse too. He says, and if an old man and an old woman commit adultery, stone them both. It reads in Arabic something like, "Al Shaykh."
Wait, so we're looking at the Sahih Hadith, just to be clear.
Yeah, and this verse is also, I think, in Abu Dawood and Nasai. It's not just this one, so it's reported in multiple places. It says, "Al Shaykh wal Shaykhatu iza zayyanna farjumuhuma." So, meaning that, if the old guy and girl committed adultery, stone them. And again, like Lee pointed out, what's the point of keeping the punishment, but removing the verse after revealing it, but then keeping the old verses it had canceled out in the Quran, as in the flogging, and then the other one where you isolate women into their houses till they die. So it's like, okay, well, the one you want to keep, that's not in the Quran, but the ones you don't want to keep, they're still there.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
No. It made sense if you understood the wisdom of God, Abdullah. You just don't understand.
All right.
Can I just point something about the manuscripts as well? I know this is not a little bit off topic, but just touching a little bit about the whole revisionist history of the Quran that we talked. None of these early manuscripts, zero of the early manuscripts has a mention. Correct me if I'm wrong. Has any references to Muhammad in them?
You can't trace them back to Muhammad. No, none of them.
No, not trace them to Muhammad. Referencing Muhammad himself
by name.
Is not mentioned in any of the.
I haven't looked into that claim yet.
Okay. Look into that, because that is significant if it's true.
Yeah, you're talking about the old men, like the Birmingham, Sana, and all that. They don't Muhammad? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
I haven't heard about that.
Yeah. Look into that. No, there's no mention of Muhammad until what was the Khalif Malik, right? During the Umayyad dynasty, that in the mention of Muhammad was in the Dome of the Rock, and some, at the same time.
Abdul Malik. No, but we're talking about the Quranic manuscripts, right?
But these Quranic manuscripts are way earlier than that time. So given that we know Muhammad was not mentioned until then there's no mention of Muhammad in any of these early manuscripts, right? And the fact that Muhammad is not mentioned in any of these early manuscripts does give some credibility to the revisionist views of the Islam.
Well, I don't understand. So you're saying that the Uthmanic Quran does mention Muhammad by name, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about the early manuscripts. They don't have any.
So the Sana doesn't, and the Birmingham one doesn't? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, they don't. Well, it's not the parts of the Quran that was supposed to have, like, these. None of these manuscripts are complete, obviously. Like, they all have pieces.
Yeah, they're all partial. Absolutely.
They're all parts of the Quran, and none of them contain the parts of the Quran where Muhammad was mentioned. So you don't have references, like the whole idea of Islam not even being Islam at that time, not being about Muhammad, not having Muhammad in Islam at that time, has not, might be true, continue to be true, if you don't have any references to Muhammad in any of these early manuscripts.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yep. Well, you look it up.
I will.
There's no mentions of Muhammad written anywhere until the whole until the Dome of the Rock thing that was
written. Interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll look at this canceled word.
I want to say one thing. I did look up something, that one of the names used by Allah for Muhammad was Taha. So the Taha is a name in the Quran that they use.
Okay, no, allegedly.
Allegedly, but that
there's no direct references to Muhammad. There's no proven references to Muhammad. There's no mention of Muhammad in any of the early manuscripts that we have found.
I don't know about that. I'll have to
look it up.
I'll look it up, definitely.
Yeah, I'm happy to be corrected. I'm not claiming like I'm I'm not claiming certainty on this at all.
Okay, no problem.
I feel like that might be a coincidence, because it does clearly talk about.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying this proves that it didn't have, because
it is interesting,
because because these are not the Quran complete. So I'm not saying that this proves that maybe if you had the complete Quran of the early manuscripts, maybe it would have it in there. But right now we don't have any pieces where it included Muhammad.
The question for the Birmingham manuscript was that does it predate the lifetime of the Prophet? Because like the original.
The carbon dating of it, like some of these carbon datings actually put the Quran, even when you adjust for the margin of error, predates it, not just Osman, not just the time of the alleged revelation of Quran, but they predate the birth of Muhammad himself, which is what the fuck, right? Yeah, but okay.
I mean, there are theories where like the Quran was like a Syriac exegesis in a poetic way on the Bible, and then it got twisted. There's this whole Syriac origins of the Qur'an book.
So let's move on because I think we have just a few minutes left. But
so what we'll do is we're almost at the end. So here we see that there's this people that get attacked, and Muhammad's pissed and he curses them, and then Allah reveals a verse: inform our people that we have met our Lord, He's pleased with us, and He has made us pleased. But then this Quranic verse was later canceled. Again, on the right side, you see the same thing being mentioned, but the point is, like, why would you cancel this verse? Because it has absolutely no legal bearing. It's just a completely spiritual verse. Why cancel it? There's no reasoning that I can think of.
Yeah.
Or no wisdom. If anything, it just shows you're trying to tell people, oh yeah, I said this. Oh no, never mind. I take it back. It makes you look worse and less preserved than anything. Now,
sorry, somebody. So I need to address this. Somebody, Aces in the left chat is saying the oldest artifact of Muhammad was the coin from the Umayyad, but Aces, that coin was from the same year that that Muhammad's name was carved into the Dome of the Rock. So you could, they are exactly the same year. So it happened at the same time. But yeah,
interesting. So here, this narration talks about. So Aisha told me to copy a Musaf, and it's about, there's a verse in the Qur'an which says, guard strictly your prayer, hafizu ala salawati was salatil wusta, right? But Aisha then says there is an additional phrase in it, hafizu ala salawati was salatil wusta was salatil asr, right? And she says she heard it from the Messenger of Allah. Like, the thing is, like, eventually there's other hadith. I'm just showing one for each, but detail goes that many Sahaba knew this variant, and then eventually it was canceled, and they said the middle prayer now refers to the Asr prayer. But what the point is that this could actually confuse people, because the Quran only mentions 3 prayers, not even 5, right?
Yeah.
So again, like the middle prayer, then the Asr prayer. Well, was it the Asr or the Dhuhr? So there's that. But just wanted to point this out, that this was part of the Quran, was revealed, and it was then removed. Now, this one's also interesting, but this one's very important, where a Sahabi goes to Syria, Sham, and he went to Abu Darda. Al-Qama goes to Abu Darda. So he said, is there anyone among you who can recite for me according to the recitation of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud? He said, yes, I can recite. So he went to this guy and asked him, how did you hear Ibn Mas'ud recite this ayah? Like, by the night, as it وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَى وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا تَجَلَّى وَمَا خَلَقَ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنثَى, as you can see on the left, is the normal Quran. But what we see in the hadith is Ibn Mas'ud did not have the phrase وَمَا خَلَقَ in his version of the recital. And the Sahabi then shows his disapproval for that version, where he says, by Allah, this is how I heard the Messenger of Allah reciting it. But these people, meaning the people of Syria, want me to recite it, وَمَا خَلَقَ, but I will not follow them. So now we have a problem where the Sahabis are saying, I don't like the recital with the وَمَا خَلَقَ, but now we have the modern Quran which has the وَمَا خَلَقَ. So
it's so interesting that the drama between these different versions it happened that at that time, and it just happening exactly the same way now.
And what's also interesting is the Sahaba, this is past Muhammad's death, I think. Right. So the Sahaba, if anybody would know about the ahruf and multiple Qur'ans, would be these guys, right?
Yeah.
But they're fighting each other, saying, no, I don't like his Quran, and I don't like his Quran. But then thousands or hundreds of years, this new scholar, the later scholars, like, oh no, but like they're all revealed. They're all the okay.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and that's a very important point, because if you ask a lot of Muslims, they keep suggesting, like, the closer to Muhammad you are, the more accurate and the more credible your claims are.
It's inverse. It's inverse of that.
But now they're okay. So it's just they contradict themselves. So much. Yeah.
Now, one of the things I wanted to highlight is to make the last damper on the Quran was Muhammad had a tendency to forget the Quran himself. I have 4 narrations. I'm just showing one where Muhammad heard this guy reciting, and he said that he reminded me of a verse which I had been made to forget. And in certain narrations, it says he had reminded me of such and such a surah that I had been made to drop from my memory. So now we are at a point where the source the main origin of the Quran's memory is being questioned. So how can we trust what he's hearing from Gabriel that he's also even remembering?
Well, he's questioning it himself. He's like, hey, I don't know. Did I remember? Did I hate this? LOL, I forgot. It's just, I don't know.
So now just imagine, remember that guy Abdullah bin Abi Sarr, the scribe that left Islam because Muhammad said, oh yeah, just add your injunction in it too. And he almost had him killed near the conquest of Mecca. So now you can see where these things will come from. But this is hilarious. Making verses on the fly. And this is like he gets caught in the act, but he still doesn't have any shame.
Okay.
So we'll start with the one on the right side first. So it's from...
There's a bit of an echo. Ali. Okay, go
what?
On.
Okay.
I hear echo. I don't know. Live chat, tell me if you're hearing echo. But go on.
Unmute.
So the verse was revealed, not equal are those of the believers who sit at home. لا يستوي القائدون من المؤمنين. Right? The Prophet said, call this so-and-so guy, and that person came to him with an ink pot and a wooden board or a shoulder scapula bone. Right? The Prophet said to him, right, not equal are those believers who sit at home and those who strive and fight in the cause of Allah. Ibn Maktum, who was sitting behind the Prophet, said, oh Allah's Messenger, I'm a blind man. So suddenly the revelation suddenly changed. So there was revealed in place of that verse, an edited version, not equal are those of the believers who sit at home, except those who are disabled. So we can see like Muhammad is just making it up like he sees it, because this guy was there and he forgot. And the guy's like, hey, what about me? And like, oh shit, I'll add this part.
Wow, or maybe the revelation came down. But this is bad either way, because either he forgot, either Muhammad forgot, and he's like, oh, okay, yeah, sorry.
Forgot.
Or Allah didn't see the guy.
Right, yeah. And or then Allah was kind of watching all this stuff, and he's like, oh, holy shit, I forgot to motherfucker. And then he's like, okay, I'll throw this in.
Now, if you go to the left side, this drama continues in a different verse. So, narrated Sal bin Sa'd, and eat and drink until the white thread appears to you distinct. From the black thread was revealed. But of dawn, the phrase "but of dawn" at this point was not revealed initially. So some men, the Sahaba, were absolute geniuses, and you can see how fucking literalist they were. When intended to fast, used to tie their legs, one with white thread and one with black thread, and would keep on eating till they could distinguish one thread from the other. Then Allah revealed the phrase "of dawn," and then they all suddenly realized, oh, it meant the night and day in the sky.
Oh wait, wait, what was it?
So there is a verse in the Quran that says, eat and drink until the white thread appears to you distinct from the black thread. Right? People took it, but people were so dumb, they started tying actual pieces of white and black thread to their legs and would eat in the morning and watch till they could distinguish the colors of those threads.
Oh, right? Like, oh yeah, I can see I can see the difference. I can still eat. I don't need to fast.
So this was causing so much confusion that Allah had to reveal an extra phrase to make it clear to them I'm referring to the sky, not the thread on your leg.
Oh my God. This is so...
Wait.
I wish we never clarified that. I'd be fasting all the time. Hey,
no, wait. Okay, so this has major implications. So God realized, okay, these idiots don't understand how metaphors work. I have to be literal to them. So if God realized that how dumb people are with metaphors, then that means that the rest of the Quran you cannot be say it's metaphoric because if the rest of it is metaphor, like God could see how literal people can get. And he had to adjust the verses in the Quran so they're not that idiot. So when Muslims tell you like, oh, this is not real, this is just a metaphor, you have to be like, no, if it was a metaphor, God would have clarified this just like he clarified that
the
other
black
metaphor.
And white threads.
Right.
Well, hey, all threads matter. Look, man,
So the last slide, we're at the last 2 slides now.
Okay, go.
If Muhammad was around today, he would definitely have that Find My Keys and Find My Car app. He was losing his keys all over the place.
Wait, I have one more question about that. Why would that be part of the hadith? Like, is that not embarrassing to like? Why would they preserve that? Like, wouldn't that be better if you just get rid of that because it's just so damning to their Quran?
Well, I guess because it's just too many abrogations. They just had to do it for intellectual integrity, or people will start accusing them of only preserving the good stuff, right? And then it'll become a problem of integrity. Like what Ibn Hisham did with the Sira, where he blotched out a bunch of parts, but then didn't realize that one of the manuscripts survived, and they were able to figure out all the parts that he had tampered with.
Oh my god!
Yeah, it's hilarious. If you actually this whole thing, if you read the translation by Gilalem of the life of the Prophet of Muhammad, it's in the foreword. All of this is detailed in how Ibn Hisham was making stuff up.
Is that must be explaining why when they got caught? Must be the reason why they're motivated to keep some of them in. You're right, because I was like I was reading Hadith Bukhari, and there's like this part that says like Aisha said like, yeah, when Muhammad has sex, his cum goes all over his clothes, and I keep washing it, and I can't get the cum out, like after washing it all the time, I still can't get rid of the cum out of his clothes. And I was thinking like, why is this here?
Yeah.
Like, why would you keep that in?
One of the things I thought of was because Aisha was widowed at the age of 18 and she couldn't remarry. Right. Later on in her years, when you take 50, 40 or whatever, she'll be fantasizing about Muhammad. So that's why she's recounting all these weird instances of semen scratch. It makes sense.
I don't know, man.
She can only fantasize, you know.
Listen, man.
Wait, fantasizing about being raped as a child? Okay, be careful after that. I don't know.
Man. Yeah, no.
Well, let's not get into the Freudian.
All right. So after seeing all of these variants, and after seeing all of these changes in manuscripts, the tamperings and the lost verses and the modern Qur'ans, you want to know the best defense of Muslims? The thing that saves it all?
What?
Is this hadith.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that it was revealed both ways, right? That one?
Yeah, so then it was revealed in 7 different ways. So recite it whichever way is easier for you.
Wait, explain this.
Let's read out this hadith because this is important. This is the ultimate apologist defense of
all the variants and everything.
The last 2.5 hours, all of the differences and the contradictions and that you've heard about different Qurans, pretty much
it boils down to this.
Yeah, this is the way that they defend it by still maintaining that it's preserved. Do you want me to read it out?
Before you do, this is Sahih Bukhari. So from all the 6 authentic hadith books, this is the most authentic one, right? So this is, you can't argue with this one.
So narrated Umar bin al-Khattab. I heard Hisham bin Hakim bin Hizam reading. Oh my God. Okay, reciting Surat al-Furqan in a way different to that of mine. Allah's messenger had taught it to me in a different way. So I was about to quarrel with him during the prayer, but I waited until he finished. Well, a very important detail. Then I tied his garment around his neck and seized him by it and brought him to Allah's messenger. So many. So this dude he heard this guy reading the surah in a different way to his, and he didn't like it, so he's like, okay, I'll let him finish praying. Then he took like this garment and then he just basically put a noose around his neck and dragged him to the Prophet. and he said, this is awesome. This should make a movie of this shit. Yeah,
this should be a movie.
And then said, I have heard him reading. So he went to the Prophet and he tells the Prophet, I have heard him reciting Surat al-Furqan in a way different to the way that you taught it to me. The Prophet ordered me to release him. So until this time, the Prophet was like, okay, don't release him yet. First tell me what's going on. And then after the guy says this whole sentence that, I heard him read it in a different way. Then the Prophet says, okay, yeah, just take that thing around his neck off. And then when he recited it, Allah's apostle said, it was revealed this way. He then asked me to recite it. When I recited it, he said, it was revealed in this way. The Quran has been revealed in 7 different ways. So recite it in the way that is easier for you.
this must be a response to these hadith writers realizing that shit, we have multiple Qurans. What do we do?
So yeah, exactly. So the thing is what's very so few things to note is the Quran in sight of itself never acknowledges any variant or different versions. Never. There is no. It doesn't say that there's two different variants of this reading or that reading.
Well, it says the opposite.
Exactly. It's like a singular text, and we reveal it will protect it, right? On the Quran, its own, it should be one text. Now, problem then follows is what the hell does ahruf mean? So the word ahruf is word. It translates to letter or word. People say it's reading. Now, there are 40, or some say 41 different Muslim scholarly opinions on what the ahruf are, right? And another thing to remember is that this is found in a hadith, which most likely emerged about 100 years after Muhammad or so. And they were canonized and put in books at that time. So this could very likely be a back projection, a post hoc rationalization being made up by Muslims later on to save the Quran. Now, what's also very interesting is, okay, 7 different ways. What do you mean by 7 different ways? Because is this talking about the dialects? Because we already know that Osman said it was preserved in the Qurayshi dialect, right?
Yeah.
But then,
Qira'at.
exactly. But then you also ask, well, wait a second. Does this also encompass all those companion variants that we noticed in the manuscripts?
Mm-hmm.
But then you ask, okay, but what about the modern variants that it encompass? Those ones, right? So now you are basically stretched thin, where firstly, you don't know what the ahruf is. It's an ambiguous thing. Some scholars say the word 7 isn't a number 7, because in the Arabic language, 7 is used metaphorically to show that there's a multitude or plethora of things, abundance of things, right? 770, 700. So
that's in the response to them realizing that this is more than 7. They're like, shit. Like, so that, they're like, oh, look, hadith is admitting it's 7, so that's why. But like, well, we have more than 7. They're like, okay,
exactly.
by 7, we don't actually mean 7. Right, God.
Right.
Go on, sir. Yeah.
So one then asks, okay, well, is the qira'at, the ahruf, are they interchangeable? Some say yes, some say no. So we have 7 qira'at, then we have also actually 10 sahih qira'at, and then some say there's a total of 14, and the last 4 aren't as sahih. So we're like, it's at this point when you realize that this ahruf thing is such a desperate way to save face, and it cannot wiggle you out of this mess. And that's what Yasir Qadi was saying, that our traditional explanations of ahruf and qira'at have many holes. The standard narrative has many holes. Because
when did he say this?
In a video, like with the Muhammad hijab, and
when?
He literally said the standard narrative has holes in it. It's no secret in academia.
Okay. Sorry, let's focus on Yasir Qadi, because I was watching an earlier video of him explaining these variations, and what he was suggesting is that these variations are like, so you say like these variations, you could define them in different ways?
In 40 different ways,
yeah, but it seemed like what they are trying to tell the average Muslim people who are like noticing this and worried about what this means is they're like, oh, the differences is kind of the difference between British and Scottish and American English, like different pronunciations.
Yeah.
But that is, so far from what we've just looked at. Like, it's not at all just different pronunciations. Like, if that's how they want to define the different variations, they're being very dishonest to the Muslim population. So you're saying the level of this has become too much for them to deny. And this, I think the video that I'm talking about, I think it was from 2 years ago, or like maybe just last year. But the more recent thing is like them admitting that we cannot just ignore these variations anymore, right?
Oh yeah, Yasir Qadi explicitly admitted to Muhammad hijab that the standard narrative of Quranic preservation that the Muslims have has holes in it, and it's no secret. Academics know about it, and he said that he doesn't want to discuss the issue in public because it's not wise, because the average Muslim will be affected by it in a way. And he said, just let the scholars discuss this issue behind closed doors.
This is our
also
silver
said to sign
bullet,
up for his
man.
class.
What?
Sorry?
He also said to enroll in his class and everything.
Yeah.
And maybe, explain to
Pay
us
him
that,
the money.
Here,
donate.
there's another devil's advocate argument I saw by Dr. Shabir Ali. Do you know that guy, Shabir Ali?
Yeah, I know. I was on the show with him.
Right. So with regards to the Sana debacle, what he's suggesting is like, okay, those earlier versions, that the one with the UV that you can see, that's not officially Quran. That's just like
paraphrasing. He says
the
that
people are paraphrasing the general messages that they remember about the Quran.
But then when he asks, why are then Omar dragging this guy over a different version to the Prophet if they're so nonchalant about paraphrasing the Quran?
Right.
Yeah, that's right. You can't put it all together. Like this is when because they look at, whenever they talk about things and try to make their case, they look at things in isolation, right? And they don't really put it all together. And then I think one of the reasons we become ex-Muslims is we decide to put it together.
You're not allowed to do that, by the way. You're not allowed to be like, oh, let me recite the Quran, but this is not accurate. I'm just going to paraphrase. Like, that used to be a fucking major sin. Like, what the fuck happened? And now they're saying, like, yeah, everybody used to do that. It's fine. Like, you're not allowed to do that with the Quran. And why would you write it down like that? Like, that seems like a major...
Maybe he's making the same point that was in that paper about how, they weren't deliberately paraphrasing it, but they wrote down a version of it that was kind of a rough draft. Like a rough draft, and they finalized it. They looked at repetitions. They're like, let's cut this down, let's take this out, and then try to make it more consistent. I don't know. It could be either way, but it's still...
So this easiest, like, again, they have to do so many gymnastics to explain what's going on while not throwing away their ideology. But the simplest explanation is always the most probable one. And the simplest explanation is like, this was an early cult that going through an evolution, and people were trying to figure out what's their scripture, and they were coming in, and this scripture was evolving just like we see with every other fucking religion, and it's exactly what you would expect to happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we'll end up with, I'll just show you, just to tell people, the 7 transmitter reciters of the Quran. I just took the screenshot. You can find, these are the Qurans you can actually buy. Like it says on the right side. So Warsh is used in Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, West Africa, and Sudan. So let's start from the left side. So on the left side, you see these names: Nafi, Ibn Kathir, Abu Amr al-Ala, Ibn Amir, Hamza, Kisai, Abu Bakr Asim, Jafar, Yaqub, Khalaf. So it's about 10 of them. Now, from those main readers, they had transmissions. So Nafi is the teacher, and his student, Warsh, is transmitting a reading from him. So Warsh al-Nafi, Qalun al-Nafi, so Duri so Hafs, like you said, Hafs and Asim is Hafs taken from Asim, the Muslim world in general. There's Khalaf bin Hamza, and then there's, like you see, so what ends up happening is you have so many teachers, and they're transmitting the Quran with at least 2-3 students each. And out of all of these, not all of them we have manuscripts for either. So at the end of it, we can see, to summarize, that we have problems literally every step of the way of the Quranic preservation. So if you look at the modern Qurans, we see variants. We work our way back, and the manuscripts, we see variants. We see Osman burning. We see Sahaba fighting each other over which part is of the Quran. Then we go to the Hadith. Muhammad keeps forgetting verses, and then Muhammad keeps making verses up on the fly, and a bunch of verses, hundreds of verses that were part of the real text no longer exist. At this point, to claim that the Quran was perfectly and miraculously preserved becomes, let's just say, a very unsustainable and ridiculous idea. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Wow.
I want to mention, by the way, that one thing that is unfortunate is that how we are so lacking in the atheist community and especially in the ex-Muslim community to talk about these things. And this is why I so appreciate Abdullah so much, because he seems to be leading among the ex-Muslim community, like to bring attention to this. Because if you look at the Christians, for example, they have jumped all over this to for their own anti-Islam propaganda, like to show like, okay, Islam is wrong, Christian. Like they have the amount of resources and marketing and the funding and that they focused on this to to make their point, and it shows how far behind the atheist community is. And because this is something that the more and more Muslims hear about, more and more of them, like, not is this obviously not one tactic is going to work on Muslims, but this is going to be one of the important ones, right? That is going to convince a whole bunch of Muslims, like, okay, this is bullshit. And coming out of Islam, it seems like the Christians are just waiting there to grab them in and welcoming them to the Christianity, and us ex-Muslims do not have the visibility and the resources to be there instead, right? And this was just basically my way of asking for people to become patrons, right?
or ask the Yehudi government for more money.
Right, yeah. For us to be able to compete with these Christians, to have the same, like at least a fraction of the resources that they have, and also to go support Abdullah Gondal and the work that he's doing. Where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter and on Facebook, and I also occasionally come Secular Jihad. This is my fourth time now. Yeah. And I appear on Abdullah Samir's channel. I'm actually now hosting a weekly call-in show every Friday. So we pick a theme, and then we talk about some topics, and we take some calls. So you can always join in if you want to engage. Apart from that, like I said, I've been trying to start my YouTube channel for a while, but then again, the virus and the COVID and all this drama just keeps getting pushed back. So hopefully I get to that eventually. My goal, though, with the YouTube channel is I want to do something different, and I actually want your opinion on it. Would be, I wanted to go into animations, like 2D animations, but do a narration in a humorous way of events in Muhammad's life.
I don't think it's cost effective. I don't like it. I don't think it's cost effective. I think you will, because if you want, animation is very difficult, very expensive, very time consuming, and it's going to stop you from producing more content. Like, people are really in need of actually to see what you have to say, and if you creating animation means less content, and I would say go with getting more videos out there rather than spending so much time on each one of them.
Yeah, you could. That part of it I agree with. Like, if you have a sort of, if it becomes gimmicky, yeah, I'm not saying it'll become gimmicky, but if there is something like that, it might become more of a distraction, because what you have is such a huge amount of content, right? So, and also, I think it would be a cool idea, though. I think I would like to see it. If you have a team that can do it for you.
Yeah, that could, like an animation team.
Yeah. Team could do it for you for free, but don't spend money on it. Yeah. But another thing is that even when it comes to just like talking about your views, even that, don't be a perfectionist, because if you're a perfectionist, it's just going to not get the stuff out there. Like, always start with the minimum viable product. It's called the MVP. And then just go with the most basic thing that you could imagine, and then keep improving that instead of like waiting for things to be great. And by the way, have you created a YouTube channel?
No, like I have a YouTube account, but no, I don't make videos.
So the thing is that make the YouTube channel, even if you're not going to start making videos yet, like just it takes 5 minutes to make it. So at least we could tell people where it's going to be, so they could subscribe even before you start making them. So at least you have the people who want to wait for your content at least somewhere to be hooked to. Right.
Hey, Susanna has a question. This is from 1246. This was the last one. That a question for later. Has Gondal done this presentation on Harris Sultan's Urdu channel?
No, not yet, but I will be doing this. I'm actually going on Apostate Prophet tomorrow at 9 p.m. We'll be doing what we did now, but in a very bullet Sharp passed away, it's gonna be like a solo almost.
Wait, that's such a great question by Susanna. That would be Earthshed. Like that would make a major noise.
So what happened was I did this similar presentation 2 years ago on Abdullah Samir's channel, and then I did an Urdu version. I think it was called Qur'an ka Tanqidi Jaz or something like that in Urdu, and it got about 100 or 90,000 views or something.
Jeez, why are you guys not on top of this? This is
So
you guys are doing the Lord's work. This is beautiful.
So we'll definitely do this in Urdu. Probably next week. Like this week, today was just I had like a stream in the morning, a stream with you guys, and I have a stream with Apostle Prophet tomorrow. Right. So maybe I'll take a break, but next weekend I might do that. Ali, you should actually join because you speak Urdu, right?
Yeah,
man.
Let me know when it is, and I'll be there.
Hilarious.
Yeah. Holy fuck. Are those one more question? Those are neurons on your shirt, or are they sperm, or is it lightning?
It's neurons, yeah.
I was right. I knew it.
But I have got the sperm thing, yes.
Okay, you have the sperm thing. Okay, everybody, that's the last word on this podcast. Abdullah Gondal has the sperm thing.
Oh,
yeah. Remember that. Thank you very much for joining us. And hey, everybody who's here, this is great. I really recommend that you watch the video. I think hearing this, just seeing all of this stuff and seeing the Arabic text and seeing the differences is actually really, really impactful. So make sure you do that.
Link in the description and link to Abdullah's, where to find Abdullah and his live streams and his Twitter, all of them in the description.
Yeah,
as well.
And I was too riveted during this, Abdullah, to actually sit down and make notes to the paper that you mentioned and some of the links that you mentioned. So if you could send me that, I'll put all of those in the description.
I'll just send you the whole presentation. Actually, you can just put it for people.
Oh yeah.
We'll have the presentation, but also links to the two papers.
I'll send them to you.
So yeah, that would be for the Son of Manuscript.
So if you're not a patron and you can't watch the video version of that, we will include the links to the slides, so you could look at the slides even if you only have the audio version. But become a patron, goddammit! Like, support the work we're doing. We're doing really good work here. Okay, and also like and subscribe and share this kind of stuff, because we need more people to see this. Guys, this is like a nail in the Quranic coffin, okay? This is like our silver bullet. Share the shit out of this, okay?
Yeah.
All right.
So, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Hashtag be best. Be best, everybody. Be best.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Hopefully we'll do this more and more. And until next time, Science Hafiz.
Science Hafiz. Inshallah, Darwin.
Insha Iblis. Insha Iblis. All right. Bye.
The secular jihadists have been made possible thanks to the Illuminati and the covert support of Israel and the CIA. That's what we have been told, but we haven't received our checks yet. If you like what we do, please support us. Share the podcast with your friends. Write and tweet us with topic and guest suggestions. Or head over to secularjihadist.com and give $1 or more for exclusive access to live video. Have your questions read and answered on the air, and more. Till next time, may the flying spaghetti monster be with you.